Hello everyone, I am the Sleepy Joe, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The headlights of my old Chevy pierced the inky darkness, casting a glow upon an endless ribbon of asphalt that stretched toward the horizon. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the empty highway lulling me into a trance-like state. The radio had long since faded to static, leaving me in a quiet solitude. In the stillness of the night, accompanied only by the soothing rhythm of tires gliding over the pavement, I found myself drawn to the soft glow of the green numbers on my dashboard clock, 2:37 a.m. It was still a long way to my sister's place in Phoenix. I had promised to help her move, but now I found myself regretting the decision to drive through the night. My eyelids felt heavy, and I fumbled for my lukewarm coffee in the cup holder. As I took a sip of the bitter liquid, a flicker of movement in my rearview mirror caught my attention. Headlights appeared in the distance. Behind me, a presence loomed larger as it drew closer. A strange blend of relief and unease washed over me. It was somewhat comforting to realize I wasn't entirely alone in this desolate expanse. Yet, the way the car swiftly closed the distance sent a chill creeping down my spine. In mere minutes, the vehicle was right on my bumper. I squinted into the mirror, attempting to discern any details, but all that met my gaze was a dark silhouette and the harsh glare of headlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I braced myself for what was to come. As I drove along the wide-open highway, I couldn't help but notice the car behind me. It was an odd sight, really, as it matched my speed perfectly, lingering just a few feet from my rear bumper. I tapped my brakes, hoping to send a subtle message, but instead, it seemed to inch even closer. A sense of unease settled in my chest, and my heart began to race. This was not typical behavior. I pressed down on the accelerator, urging my old car to go faster. The speedometer climbed steadily, 70, 75, 80 miles per hour, but the car behind me remained unfazed, keeping pace with an unsettling ease. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, my palms growing clammy as the tension in the air thickened. "Sweaty, what do you want?" I muttered, glancing nervously between the road ahead and my rearview mirror. After a few more minutes of this nerve-wracking pursuit, I spotted a sign for an upcoming rest area. My gas tank was still nearly full, but I decided to pull over anyway. Perhaps this strange figure would simply pass me by if I got off the road. I flicked on my turn signal and began to decelerate. To my surprise and relief, the headlights behind me dimmed as the car slowed down too. As I pulled into the rest area and found a parking spot, I felt a momentary sense of calm wash over me. As I observed the other vehicle speed away down the highway, it quickly vanished into the enveloping darkness. I released a long breath, realizing I had been holding it for far too long. "Get it together," I murmured to myself, shaking my head. "You're letting your imagination run wild." The rest area lay deserted, a modest building housing restrooms and vending machines, encircled by a few picnic tables. I stepped out of my car, stretching my legs and inhaling the cool night air. The silence was absolute. No traffic noise, no insects chirping, not even a whisper of a breeze. As I made my way through the rustling, scraggly trees that dotted the landscape, I found myself heading toward the restroom. Fishing some change out of my pocket for the vending machines, I pushed open the heavy metal door. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, humming faintly in the stillness. I winced at my reflection in the grimy mirror, bloodshot eyes and stubble shadowing my jaw. Splashing some cold water on my face, I tried to wake myself up. When I emerged a few minutes later, clutching a bag of stale chips and a bottle of water, I froze in my tracks. There, parked right next to my Chevy, was a car sat quietly in the shadows, its presence barely noticeable in the dim light. As I drew nearer, I couldn't shake the feeling that it resembled the one that had been following me. My breath caught in my throat, a mix of curiosity and unease. The vehicle was empty, its windows tinted so darkly that the interior remained a mystery. I glanced around the rest area, searching for any sign of the driver, but found only silence. Suddenly, a gust of wind whisked a discarded paper bag across the pavement, startling me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that it was likely just another traveler who had pulled in for a moment of rest. After you left, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, wrapping around me like a cold fog. I hurried back to my car, fumbling with the keys, my heart racing as I slid into the driver's seat. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I turned my head sharply, but found only shadows dancing in the stillness. My hands trembled as I started the engine, the sound echoing in the quiet night. As I pulled out of the parking lot, the gravel crunched beneath my tires, and in the rearview mirror, I noticed headlights igniting behind me. Panic surged within me as I whispered, "No, no, no," my knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. As I gripped the steering wheel, a sense of disbelief washed over me. This couldn't be happening. I pressed the accelerator hard, the engine of my old Chevy protesting as I pushed it to its limits. The headlights remained right behind me, neither gaining nor losing ground. Miles of empty highway stretched out ahead, and I desperately tried to put distance between us. My mind raced through possible explanations and options. Should I try to call for help? But my cell phone was dead. I had forgotten to charge it before leaving. Could I outlast them? Eventually, they'd need to stop for gas, wouldn't they? Just as I was considering some evasive maneuvers I'd seen in movies played out as a new set of headlights appeared on the horizon ahead of me. Relief flooded through me. Another car, a witness, maybe even help. As the approaching vehicle drew closer, I flashed my headlights desperately, trying to signal that something was wrong. But the car didn't slow down. It blazed past me at high speed. In the brief moment it was alongside me, I caught a glimpse of the driver. The car was empty. I let out a strangled gasp, nearly swerving off the road in shock. That was impossible. Perhaps I had not seen correctly in that fleeting moment when the car passed. Yet a chilling dread settled deep within me as I replayed the image in my mind. There had been no one behind the wheel. My gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, where the car that had been following me remained, keeping pace. Now it was accompanied by the car that had just passed, both sets of headlights glaring in unison, perfectly aligned. I felt trapped between them, panic clawing at my throat. This couldn't be real. I must be hallucinating. Surely it was the lack of sleep, the weight of stress playing tricks on my mind. As the long drive wore on, a sense of unease settled over me. I shook my head, trying to dispel the creeping dread. But when I glanced back at the road, my heart sank. More headlights emerged in the distance, first a few, then dozens, all racing toward me. As they drew nearer, I realized with a chill that each vehicle was empty, the driver's seats eerily vacant yet moving with an unsettling precision. I found myself encircled by this convoy of ghostly cars. My breath quickened, panic rising within me as I frantically searched for an escape route. But the phantom vehicles had closed in, leaving me with nowhere to turn. An impenetrable wall surrounded me. No matter which way I turned, they shifted to block my path. Suddenly, all the cars began to slow down in unison, and I felt my own speed drop, as if an unseen force was guiding my vehicle. We came to a halt in the middle of the highway, my car at the center of a circle of silent, driverless cars. For a long moment, nothing stirred. The only sounds were my own panicked breaths and the ticking of my engine as it cooled. Then, one by one, the doors of the surrounding cars began to open, and dark figures emerged. Each vehicle took on humanoid shapes, yet something felt amiss. They moved with an eerie fluidity, gliding rather than walking. As they drew closer, I noticed their bodies appeared to be composed of swirling shadows, constantly shifting and reforming. I scrambled to lock my doors, but my trembling fingers struggled to find the button. One of the shadow figures reached my car and placed a hand on the window. Where it touched, frost spread across the glass in intricate patterns, and the temperature inside my car plummeted. My breath fogged in front of me. As I pressed myself against the seat, seeking refuge from the window, a shadow loomed closer, its faceless form mere inches away, separated only by the fragile barrier of glass. Then, in a surreal twist, it began to push through, the glass rippling like water as the figure's head and shoulders emerged into my car. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. The shadowy creature reached for me with hands woven from darkness, and just as its cold fingers grazed my skin, a blaring horn jolted me awake. I sat bolt upright, my heart racing. I found myself in my car, parked on the shoulder of the highway. Sunlight poured through the windows, and a semi-truck thundered by, its driver casting me an annoyed glance. It took me a few moments to gather my thoughts. I must have pulled over at some point during the night, too weary to press on. The harrowing journey had felt like a dream. I rubbed my hands over my face, attempting to dispel the lingering unease from the nightmare. As my breathing gradually steadied, I reached for the key to restart my car, but my hand froze in place. The passenger seat beside me held a solitary black feather, which I watched as it crumbled to ash and was carried away by an unseen breeze. I lingered there for what felt like an eternity, gazing at the vacant seat, attempting to assure myself of my own wakefulness. Eventually, I shifted the car into drive and merged back onto the highway, yet the sensation lingered, shadows danced just beyond my peripheral vision, and in the depths of my rearview mirror, phantom headlights seemed to draw closer. The scream that pierced the stillness of our farm that night was unlike any human sound. It was something otherworldly, something that chilled the very air around me. It was an animal, or perhaps something in between, a sound that sent chills through my veins and raised the hairs on my neck. I had grown accustomed to the various noises of this land, the low bellow of cattle, the sharp cries of hawks, and even the distant screech of a mountain lion. But this was something entirely different, emanating from the old silo. I am Benjamin Sullivan, the third-generation owner of Sullivan Family Farm. Our operation is modest, a simple expanse of cornfields and cattle pastures, tucked away in the rolling hills of rural Indiana. The farm has been in my family for nearly a century, passed down from my grandfather to my father and now to me. I know every inch of this land like the back of my hand, or at least I thought I did. The night everything changed started like any other. I had finished my evening chores, fed the livestock, and was looking forward to a cold beer and some mindless TV before bed. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, while a warm breeze rustled through the cornfields, carrying. The earthy scent of late summer lingered in the air as I made my way toward the house. Suddenly, I heard it, a bone-chilling cry that pierced the twilight. I froze, my work boots firmly planted on the dusty path. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I had imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time, unmistakable. My first instinct was to flee, either away from the sound or toward the house to call for help. Yet, something kept me rooted in place. Curiosity, perhaps, or a stubbornness that felt almost primal. Maybe it was the weight of responsibility that comes with being the man of the farm. Whatever it was, I found myself unable to move. Turning towards the old silo instead of away from it, I felt a chill in the air. The silo loomed against the darkening sky, a hulking cylinder of corroded metal that hadn't been used in years. It was the oldest structure on the property, built by my grandfather in the 1930s. We had switched to more modern grain storage decades ago, and the silo had stood empty ever since, a silent sentinel at the edge of the cornfields. As I approached, my footsteps crunching on gravel, an eerie silence fell over the farm. No crickets chirping, no distant low of cattle, just the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the stillness. Own ragged breathing and the thudding of my heart in my ears. The silo's rusted door stood slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how foolish this was. I had no weapon, no flashlight, nothing but my own two hands and a stubborn need to know what was going on in my own backyard. I pushed the door open wider, wincing at the screech of metal on metal. The interior was pitch black, the fading twilight unable to penetrate the silo's depths. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, cursing under my breath. As I paused, a breath caught in my throat, realizing I had left it charging back in the house. "Hello," I called out, my voice reverberating through the stillness that enveloped the space. Was anyone there? The silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I took a cautious step inside, allowing my eyes to adjust to the dimness. The air was thick, carrying the musty scent of aged grain, mingled with a sharp, acrid odor that made my nose twitch. Gradually, as my vision sharpened, shapes began to emerge from the shadows. The concrete floor was strewn with remnants of the past, discarded machinery, empty feed bags, and rusted tools. Yet, something else drew my attention, something lurking just beyond the periphery of my sight. There were marks that seemed to tell a story of their own, deep and jagged grooves etched into the cold metal walls of the silo. They began near the floor, stretching upwards, some reaching heights that vanished into the shadows of the dim light. My mind swirled, grappling with the mystery of their origin. What force could have created such marks? And for what purpose? As I traced one of the scratches with my calloused fingers, I felt the roughness beneath my touch, a testament to something powerful and desperate. Suddenly, a sound from above startled me, a faint scraping noise that barely pierced the silence, causing me to pull my hand back in instinctive caution. As I stood there, a sound like something brushing against metal caught my attention. I tilted my head back, squinting into the enveloping darkness above. That's when I noticed it. A ladder, weathered and worn, ascending the side of the silo, reaching toward the unknown. The metal rungs were cloaked in rust, yet they seemed sturdy enough to bear my weight. At the very top, I thought I glimpsed a flicker of movement. Before reason could take hold, I found myself climbing. The rungs felt cold beneath my hands, flakes of rust crumbling onto my palms. Every instinct urged me to retreat, to flee from this eerie place and never look back. Yet, an unseen force compelled me onward, an echo of something ancient and unsettling. The need to uncover the source of that haunting cry tugged at me, overpowering the instinct to flee. I found myself halfway up, suspended in a moment of dread, when the sound pierced the silence once more, an inhuman wail that seemed to resonate from the very shadows above. My grip tightened on the ladder, heart racing as if it might escape my chest. Time stretched, and I lingered there, caught between the pull of fear and the allure of the unknown. Finally, with a deep breath, I resumed my ascent, each rung a step deeper into the mystery, my breath ragged in the stillness of the silo. As I approached the top, a new sound emerged, a low, rhythmic thumping that sent a chill down my spine. Something heavy was being dragged across metal, a sound emanating from the very top of the silo, just out of sight. I reached the final rung, my arms trembling with both exertion and fear. Taking a deep breath, I poked my head up through the opening at the top of the ladder. What I saw there will linger in my mind for all time. The top of the silo was bathed in pale moonlight streaming through the open roof hatch, and there, in the center of the circular space, was something. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but larger, much larger. The skin was a mottled gray, hung in loose folds over a skeletal frame, its long spindly limbs ending in claws that scraped against the metal floor with each movement, creating the dragging sound I had heard. But it was the creature's face that sent a chill through my veins. Where eyes should have been, there were only dark, empty sockets, and its mouth was a gaping maw filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth, opened wide in a silent scream. For a moment, we stared at each other, me, frozen in horror, and the creature, its eyeless gaze somehow fixed directly on me. Then it It moved faster than one would expect for such a creature, lunging toward me with an unsettling swiftness. In that moment, instinct took over. I released my grip on the ladder and surrendered to the fall, the world around me spinning into a void of darkness. When I hit the ground, the impact stole my breath, and pain coursed through my body. Yet, adrenaline surged, urging me to rise. I stumbled toward the silo door, my vision hazy and my ears ringing. Behind me, I could hear the creature descending, its claws scraping against the metal as it made its way down. With an inhuman agility, I burst out of the silo, gasping in the cool night air. Without a glance back, I ran, faster than I had ever run in my life, across the fields toward the safety of the farmhouse. The sound of pursuit faded behind me, yet I did not slow down until I had slammed and locked the door securely. The rest of the night was spent huddled in my bedroom, every light in the house blazing, a loaded shotgun resting across my lap. As the first rays of dawn crept through the windows, I finally gathered the courage to reflect on the events of the night. The courage to gaze beyond the farm was a serene experience in the soft morning light, devoid of any trace of the terror I had faced. A part of me longed to convince myself it had all been a mere nightmare, a figment of my imagination fueled by stress and fatigue. Yet, deep down, I understood the truth. That morning, I reached out to the sheriff, attempting to convey the strange events without sounding utterly mad. To his credit, he listened with a calm demeanor and assured me he would send a deputy to investigate. Naturally, they found nothing. No creature lurking, no marks on the silo. As the deputy cast a glance my way, it was a blend of pity and suspicion, as if he believed I might be either delusional or playing a trick. Yet, I am certain of what I witnessed, aware of the presence lurking in the shadows of that old silo. Each night, as the sun sinks beneath the horizon, I find myself gazing at that weathered structure, searching for any hint of movement. For deep within, I understand the reality. Whatever that entity was, it remains out there, biding its time, and one day it will return. The farm has been a witness to this unsettling truth. For generations, this land has coursed through my veins, a part of my very essence. Yet now, for the first time, I find myself contemplating a departure, the thought of leaving this place behind. Some sights, once witnessed, linger in the mind, and certain horrors, once stirred, refuse to be silenced. The instant I laid eyes on those blood-stained hands, a chilling realization washed over me. I had made a grave error, but alas, it was too late. The sun dipped below the horizon. My phone lay lifeless, and I found myself stranded on a desolate stretch of road, accompanied by a stranger whose smile held a shadow of something unsettling. It all began so innocently, just another long drive on my cross-country road trip, the kind of journey I had dreamed about since childhood. There I was with my trusty, beat-up Honda Civic, embracing the open road, filled with freedom, adventure, and the promise of new horizons. My name is Olivia, and at 28 years old, I was finally taking that gap year I had never managed to embark on after college. 5 years of grinding away in a cubicle had left me feeling hollow and unfulfilled, so I made the bold decision to quit my job, sell most of my belongings, and hit the road. I had no real destination in mind, just a vague plan to head west and see where the journey would take me. The wind embraced me for the first few weeks, bringing with it all I had dreamed of: breathtaking vistas, charming roadside attractions, and late nights spent around campfires with fellow travelers. I felt more alive than I had in years. Yet, as I ventured deeper into the heartland, the allure of the road began to wane. Long stretches of monotonous highway and endless fields of corn and wheat stretched before me, and the novelty of gas station coffee and greasy diner food had long since faded. So, when my car began to emit an ominous rattling noise somewhere in the middle of it all, a chill crept in, whispering of the unknown ahead. In the heart of Kansas, a sense of unease settled within me. Though I lacked mechanical expertise, The ominous sounds emanating from my vehicle were unmistakable. I pressed on, the rattling intensifying with each mile, a foreboding soundtrack to my journey. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, I caught sight of a weathered sign announcing the town of Pinedale, population 362. It seemed a modest place, yet it held the promise of a mechanic before darkness enveloped the road. However, fate had other plans. A mere 5 miles from Pinedale, my car let out a final, despairing sputter and succumbed to silence. I glided to the shoulder, a plume of smoke swirling into the twilight sky. From beneath the hood, I muttered softly to myself as I stepped out to assess the situation. The sharp, acrid scent of burning oil enveloped me the moment I lifted the hood. Even without much experience, it was evident that this was no simple roadside repair. I reached for my phone, only to discover the battery had succumbed to the day's demands, drained completely. In my rush to hit the road that morning, I had neglected to charge it. A wave of unease washed over me as I surveyed my surroundings. Nothing but endless fields and a sky growing darker with each passing moment. The last vehicle I had spotted had long since vanished into the distance. An hour ago, I found myself in quite the predicament, stranded and pondering my next move. Should I brave the night and walk towards town, or should I seek refuge in my car until morning? Just as I was lost in thought, a distant rumble broke the silence. Relief washed over me as headlights appeared, illuminating the darkened road. An old pickup truck, weary from years of service, approached slowly. The driver, a man in his mid-40s, leaned out the window, his voice warm and inviting. "Car trouble?" he inquired, his tone friendly enough to ease my worries. I nodded, attempting to mask the desperation that gnawed at me. "Yeah, I think it's the engine. Any chance you?" There was a mechanic in town who greeted me with a smile, yet something about it stirred a sense of unease within me. His eyes remained cold and assessing, lacking the warmth one might expect. "Well, you're in luck," he said. "I do a bit of mechanical work myself. Why don't I take a look?" Before I could utter a word, he was already out of his truck, striding towards my car. I watched as he leaned over the hood, making thoughtful noises. "Oh yeah, I see the problem," he remarked after a moment. "Looks like your timing belt snapped. Took out a good chunk of your engine with it." Fear gripped me as my heart sank. I sensed the impending expense. I inquired about a quick fix to get me to town, though deep down, I already knew the answer. He shook his head, a somber look in his eyes. "No, I'm afraid this old girl isn't going anywhere under her own power. But tell you what, I can give you a tow into my shop in Pinedale. We can sort it out there." I hesitated, every instinct warning me against getting into a car with this stranger. Yet what choice did I have? Darkness would soon envelop the world, and I couldn't very well spend the night out here. "Out here, that's really kind of you," I said, attempting to sound grateful rather than apprehensive. "I truly appreciate it." He waved off my thanks, saying it was no trouble at all, always happy to help a traveler in need. "Name's John," he added. "Olivia," I replied, shaking his offered hand. That's when I noticed it. As our palms met, I caught a glimpse of something dark, caked under his fingernails and in the creases of his knuckles. At first, I thought it was grease or oil. He was a mechanic, after all. But as he pulled his hand away, I felt a chill creeping in, realized with a jolt of horror that it was blood. My mind raced. There could be innocent explanations, right? Maybe he'd cut himself working on a car earlier, or perhaps he was a hunter and had been field dressing his kill. But the way his eyes glittered as he watched my reaction told me this was something far more sinister. I forced a smile, trying to act as if I hadn't noticed anything amiss. "So, shall we get started on that tow?" Jan nodded, turning back to his truck to fetch a tow cable. As soon as his back was turned, in that moment, a decision had to be made, swift and urgent. I turned to flee, but before I could escape, A hand gripped my shoulder. John's voice, now a whisper laced with menace, reached my ear. Now, Olivia, let's not do anything foolish. A cold realization washed over me as I felt the sharp edge of a knife pressing against my side, sending a shiver of dread through my veins. Get in the truck, John commanded. His earlier friendliness evaporated. With the knife at my back, compliance was my only option. As we drove away, leaving my car behind, I caught a glimpse of the fading light, the last remnants of safety slipping away into the night. As the sunlight slipped away from the horizon, the encroaching darkness seemed to echo the heaviness in my heart. We traveled in silence, the minutes stretching out like hours, though it could not have been more than 20. The knife pressed against my side served as a relentless reminder of the peril surrounding me. At last, John veered off the main road onto a rough dirt track. We jolted along for a few moments until a crumbling farmhouse emerged from the shadows. My heart sank. This was no mechanic's shop. Home sweet home, John said, his voice carrying a strange mix of familiarity and foreboding. As we stepped out of the truck, a chill ran through me, and I felt the tremor in my voice as I made one last desperate plea. Please, I said, hoping against hope. You don't have to do this. Just let me go, and I swear I won't tell anyone. John's laughter echoed around us, cold and devoid of warmth. Oh, Olivia, don't you know? No one ever leaves Pinedale. He marched me toward the house, the knife glinting ominously in his blood-stained hand. As we approached the porch, a sound pierced the stillness, sending a shiver down my spine. The muffled screams from within. In that moment, a dreadful realization settled over me. I knew I was trapped. It was a moment of urgency, a choice between action and inaction. Summoning every bit of strength and courage within me, I drove my elbow back into John's solar plexus. He let out a grunt, a mix of pain and surprise, and his grip on me loosened just enough for me to make my escape. I bolted into the enveloping darkness, the sounds of John's curses echoing behind me, his heavy footsteps chasing after me. Yet, fear and adrenaline surged through me, granting me a speed I had never known. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. When I finally dared to glance back, there was no sign of John, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. I just kept running. Through the cornfields and across muddy creeks. I ran, the first pale light of dawn beginning to streak the eastern sky. Still, I ran. It was mid-morning when I finally stumbled onto a highway. A kind-faced woman in a minivan stopped to help, her eyes widening at my wild appearance and frantic story. She drove me straight to the sheriff's office in the next town over. The investigation that followed uncovered horrors beyond my worst nightmares. John wasn't just a killer. He was part of something larger, something... For years, a sinister presence had been lurking, targeting unfortunate travelers. They stumbled upon my car, and though the engine was in perfect condition, John had simply disconnected the battery, leaving me stranded. A clever ruse that almost cost me dearly. Now, 6 months have passed since that fateful night, and I find myself back home. The dreams of carefree adventures have faded, replaced by haunting visions of blood-stained hands and desolate roads. Yet I am alive. I survived. In the stillness of the night, my thoughts often drift to those other souls, the ones who were not as fortunate as I. The ones whose cries echoed through that old farmhouse linger in my thoughts, and I ponder how many others remain out there, yearning for aid that may never arrive. So I recount my tale repeatedly to anyone willing to lend an ear, for perhaps, just perhaps, it might spare someone else from the missteps I took, trusting too readily, dismissing their instincts. For on the vast, open road, freedom and peril often intertwine, and sometimes the true terrors aren't concealed beneath your bed. They lie in wait by the roadside, poised to extend an invitation. The first hint that something was amiss came when I discovered a single long black hair resting on my pillow. It was peculiar, considering my own blonde locks, and even more so since I was traveling alone. In that moment, I understood that the nightmare had already begun, right here in the heart of paradise. My name is Sophia, and this was meant to be the trip of a lifetime. A 2-week Gulf of Mexico cruise to celebrate my 30th birthday and my recent promotion. I had saved for months, indulging in a balcony cabin with breathtaking ocean views, as promised in the glossy brochure. It promised sun-drenched days, star-filled nights, and memories to last a lifetime. Yet, it failed to mention the lurking terror that would keep me awake at night, pondering whether I would escape this floating city unscathed. The crew began their duties flawlessly as I boarded the grand vessel, the SS Horizon's Edge, filled with awe and excitement. My cabin was everything I had envisioned, spacious, with a private balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the shimmering Gulf of Mexico. I spent that first day wandering the ship, marveling at the numerous pools and the opulent restaurants. As I wandered through the bustling casino, it felt as though I had entered a realm untouched by my daily concerns. That evening, I encountered my cabin neighbor, a seasoned traveler named Margaret, who shared tales of her many voyages. We agreed to meet for breakfast the following morning, but as the hours passed, Margaret did not appear for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Initially, I brushed it off. The ship was vast, after all, with countless distractions. Perhaps she had found new companions or was simply resting after a late night. It was a night at the casino, and as the days slipped by without a glimpse of her, a nagging worry began to settle deep within me. By the third day, I could no longer hold back my unease. I approached the cabin steward, hoping for some clarity about Margaret. His response, however, sent a chill creeping down my spine. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his brow furrowed in confusion. "But there's no one registered in the cabin next to yours. It's been empty this whole voyage." I insisted he must be mistaken, that I had met and spoken with Margaret, but he merely shook his head, concern etched across his face. I could sense his curiosity about whether the sun and sea air had affected me that night. I lay awake in my cabin, straining to catch any sound from next door. The walls of these ships were thin. I should have heard something, yet all I encountered was an enveloping silence. Restless, I stepped out onto my balcony, hoping the fresh air would soothe my mind. That's when I noticed it. A flicker of movement in the cabin next door, a shadow gliding behind the curtains. Someone was inside. My heart raced as I hurried As I approached Margaret's door, a sense of determination washed over me. But just as I reached for the handle, I was halted by an unexpected sight. Stuck to the outside of my door was a Polaroid photo, capturing a moment of vulnerability. I was sleeping in my bed, the image taken from within my own cabin. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had invaded my space while I lay unaware, their gaze lingering over me. Panic gripped my heart as I hurriedly locked and bolted the door, reinforcing it with a chair for added security. The remainder of the night was spent in a tense vigil, huddled in the corner of my cabin, each creak and groan of the ship sending shivers through me as I awaited the dawn. Finally, I made my way to ship security, my heart racing as I presented the photo and recounted my story about Margaret. I implored them to look into it, but the head of security, a stern-faced man named Harris, appeared more irritated than worried. "We take the safety of our passengers very seriously," he stated, though his tone implied otherwise. "We've checked the logs, and the cabin next to yours is unoccupied. There is no passenger named Margaret on this cruise. As for the photo, are you sure you didn't take it yourself? Perhaps as a joke?" I was taken aback, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. As I listened to their doubts, feeling a mix of frustration and fear, I resolved to uncover the truth myself. I began to observe my surroundings more intently, searching for anything unusual. At first, it was the little things that caught my eye, subtle exchanges between crew members, their glances laden with unspoken words when they thought no one was watching. There was also the unsettling presence of someone always lingering near my cabin, regardless of the hour. Then came the disappearances. Not just Margaret, other passengers I'd met and chatted with would suddenly vanish with no explanation. When I asked about them, I was met with blank stares or insistence that no such person had ever been on board. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to take a walk around the ship. The decks were eerily quiet, most passengers long since retired to their cabins. As I rounded a corner, I saw a group of crew members huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but their serious expression sent a chill down my spine. A shiver traveled down my spine as I turned to leave, my foot scuffing against the deck. The sound echoed in the stillness of the night, and the crew members' heads snapped up in unison. The look in their eyes as they spotted me was not one of surprise or embarrassment at being overheard. It was hunger. I ran, and behind me, I could hear footsteps gaining on me quickly. I didn't dare look back, focusing instead on putting one foot in front of the other, my lungs burning as I gasped for air. I made it back to my cabin and locked myself in, my heart pounding so hard I thought it. As the panic within me began to ebb, a strange calm settled over my heart. I pondered the events that had unfolded, questioning my own sanity or if perhaps something truly malevolent was at play. The following day, I resolved to seek assistance one final time. I approached a group of passengers gathered by the pool, eager to convey the peril that loomed over us all. Yet, as I opened my mouth to speak, I noticed their expressions shift. Their eyes became vacant, their smiles rigid and false. In perfect harmony, they rose from their seats and drifted away, leaving me solitary by the desolate pool. It was in that moment I understood the chilling truth. On this ship, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped not just a few crew members, but nearly all of them. For the next few days, I found myself in a state of heightened alertness, sleep eluding me as I flinched at every creak and whisper. The ship's restaurants held no appeal, and I survived on the meager snacks I had brought from home, my trust in others evaporating like mist. Then, 3 days before our scheduled docking, I stumbled upon a chilling revelation. In my cabin, I was in a frantic search for my passport, feeling an urgent need to be prepared to flee the moment we reached port. As I rummaged through my suitcase, my fingers grazed something hard and cold. It was a small metal object. When I pulled it out, a chill ran through me. It was a set of surgical tools, crusted with what appeared to be dried blood. I hadn't placed those there. I would never do such a thing. Yet, a fleeting memory surfaced. The first night on the ship, the welcome cocktail that had tasted slightly off, and the strange, dreamlike state that followed. What had I done? I sat there, staring at the damning evidence in my hands, when suddenly, a knock echoed at my cabin door. "Housekeeping," a cheerful voice called out, but I remained silent, frozen in place, unable to draw a breath. The knocking grew more urgent, echoing in the stillness. "Miss Sophia, we know you're in there. It's time for your treatment." Treatment? What treatment? I had never consented to any such thing. The door handle rattled, once, then twice, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of a key card sliding into the lock. In that chilling moment, instinct kicked in. I seized my emergency bag, the one I had prepared days earlier when the first hints of danger crept into my mind, and I fled. As the cabin door swung open behind me, I found myself compelled to leap into the unknown. The icy embrace of the water shocked me back to the present, and I broke the surface, gasping for breath. Above me, the towering hull of the ship loomed, and I could see figures on my balcony, their fingers pointing down in a mix of surprise and concern. In the distance, the wailing of alarms began to pierce the night air. I started to swim, uncertainty swirling within me. I had no way of knowing how far I was from land or if I could reach it, but one truth anchored my thoughts. Whatever fate awaited me in these dark waters, it surely could not be worse than what I had just escaped. As I departed, the ship's lights began to fade into the distance. The final sound that reached my ears before the waves enveloped everything was a voice echoing through the ship's PA system. "Attention passengers, we seem to have lost one of our own. But fear not. On the SS Horizon's edge, no one has ever truly lost. Sleep tight and sweet dreams." I swam for what felt like an eternity. Hours, perhaps days. My muscles ached and my lungs screamed for relief. Yet, against all odds, I spotted lights on the horizon, a beacon of hope from the Coast Guard. With great effort, I pulled myself onto the beach, weary but alive. My ordeal was far from over. Who would truly believe my tale? A ship filled with souls entwined in a strange cult, a vast conspiracy that even I struggled to accept. Yet, I was certain of what I had witnessed, of the experiences that haunted me. It was imperative to share my story, to reach those willing to listen. For somewhere out there, the SS Horizon's edge continues its voyage, luring unsuspecting passengers, and not everyone will escape as I did. If you're contemplating a cruise, I urge you to take a moment to double-check your itinerary. Imagine a ship named the Horizon's Edge, a vessel that beckons you to run, to flee as swiftly as your legs can carry you. For aboard that ship, the nightmares take form, and the darkness is all too palpable. The first time we stumbled upon the symbols etched into the trees, we chuckled, dismissing them as mere folly from a wandering hiker. Yet, by the time the truth dawned upon us, we found ourselves ensnared in a labyrinth of ancient pines, shadows lurking, something unseen intent on keeping us from escape. My name is Caleb, and for the better part of my 28 years, I have roamed the trails, believing I had encountered every perilous path. But this was a different kind of treachery. Mountain paths, unexpected wildlife encounters, and even the occasional rescue mission for less experienced trekkers were all part of the adventure. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded in the depths of Allegheny National Forest. It was meant to be a routine weekend trip, one that my best friend Liam and I had meticulously planned for months. We pored over maps and trail guides, eager to explore one of the most remote areas of the forest. Though we had both grown up near Blackwood, this particular region had always been off-limits. Too dangerous, too easy to get lost. We found ourselves in the embrace of the Rangers, a place where experience and confidence mingled, perhaps a touch too freely. It was a crisp Saturday morning when we set out, the air rich with the scent of pine and damp earth. The first few hours unfolded as we had envisioned. Challenging terrain, breathtaking views, and a sense of true wilderness that feels rare in this world. Yet, as midday approached, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. "Hey, Caleb," Liam called out, his voice laced with confusion. "Come check this out." I retraced my steps to where he stood, curiosity piqued. As I stood there, gazing up at the towering old-growth pine, I initially failed to grasp what had captured his attention. But then, my eyes began to discern a series of symbols etched deeply into the bark. They were unlike any trail markers I had encountered before. Intricate spirals and angular lines wove together in patterns that appeared to shift the longer I observed them. An unsettling feeling washed over me, and I found myself muttering, "Weird," as I traced my fingers over the grooves. They felt ancient, worn smooth by the passage of time, and I couldn't help but wonder if they were merely the handiwork of some bored kids seeking adventure. Around Liam nodded, yet I could sense the doubt flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, probably," he murmured, and we pressed on, attempting to dispel the unsettling aura those symbols had cast upon us. However, as the afternoon stretched on, we began to notice more of them. Every few hundred yards, another tree stood marked with those peculiar carvings. Yet, there was something else gnawing at me, an elusive feeling I couldn't quite grasp. It wasn't until Liam's voice broke the silence that the truth dawned on me. "Caleb," he said, his tone low and tense, "have you heard any birds lately?" Everything came to a halt as I listened closely. He was correct. The forest had fallen into an eerie silence. No birds sang, no small creatures stirred in the underbrush. Only the sound of our own breaths and the crunch of leaves beneath our boots filled the air. A chill crept down my spine, unrelated to the dropping temperature. Perhaps we should turn back, I proposed, striving to mask the unease creeping into my voice. We can always explore this trail another day. Liam nodded, his eagerness betraying his own discomfort. Together, we examined our map and GPS, plotting our next move, the quickest route back to the trailhead. But as we began to retrace our steps, nothing felt familiar. The trees seemed to press in closer, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Shadows deepened, despite it being early afternoon, and those symbols, they were everywhere now, carved into nearly every tree we passed. After an hour of increasingly panicked hiking, we had to face the truth. We were lost. "This is impossible," Liam muttered, frantically checking his GPS. "We should have hit the main trail by now. It's like..." It felt as though the entire forest had transformed around us. Just as I was about to speak, a twig snapped somewhere behind us, and we both turned sharply, our hearts racing. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling in the heavy silence. "Is someone there?" No answer came, but I could have sworn I glimpsed something shifting in the shadows between the trees. A flicker of movement unlike any creature I had ever encountered. "We need to get out of here," Liam whispered, his face now ashen. We chose a direction and began to walk, trying to steady our breaths. As we moved through the forest, we did so with a quiet urgency, trying to cover ground swiftly while stifling the rising sense of unease. The feeling of being watched clung to us like a heavy fog. Every few moments, a flicker of movement would catch my eye, only to vanish when I turned to investigate. As the light began to wane, a creeping panic took hold. We were ill-prepared for a night in this unsettling place. Our flashlights cast long, eerie shadows that danced around us, and we flinched at every rustle and crack that echoed in the darkness. Then, amidst the silence, we heard it, a sound that sent a chill down our spines. In the stillness of the night, a sound began to weave its way into my consciousness. It started as a low hum, barely perceptible, yet it grew louder, transforming into something that resembled words, almost. It felt as though the very forest was attempting to communicate. Liam, gripped by fear, clutched my arm, his fingers pressing into my skin. "Tell me you hear that," he urged, his voice trembling. I nodded, too frightened to utter a sound. The elusive words enveloped us, rising and falling in a haunting rhythm that sent my mind reeling, until suddenly, they were pierced by an otherworldly echo. A scream pierced the stillness, a human cry echoing with terror and pain, emanating from somewhere ahead, deeper within the forest. We stood frozen, caught in the tension between the instinct to flee and the deep-seated urge to assist someone in distress. "We have to check it out," I finally said, a sense of dread washing over me as the words slipped from my lips. What if someone was hurt? Liam appeared ready to protest but ultimately nodded, his expression grim. We moved forward slowly, each step feeling like we were sinking deeper into a trap. The screaming had ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. In the stillness of the night, we found ourselves in a small clearing, our flashlights casting beams that revealed a sight both mesmerizing and unsettling. At the heart of this clearing stood an ancient tree, its trunk broader than any I had ever encountered, twisted and gnarled by the passage of time. Every inch of its bark was adorned with symbols, intricate and otherworldly, whispering secrets of ages long past. Yet, it was what lay at the base of this towering sentinel that sent a chill through my veins. A collection of objects, incongruous in their presence, watches, phones, wallets, a multitude of them, abandoned in the depths of the wilderness. Arranged in a careful circle around the tree were personal belongings from other hikers, those who had wandered into this part of the forest and never made it out. "We need to go," Liam whispered, tugging at my sleeve. Now, Caleb, we need to go right now. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the grisly display. As we turned to leave, my flashlight beam caught something moving at the edge of the clearing. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, stepped out from behind a tree. It looked almost human, but wrong. Its limbs were too long. There were movements too fluid, and where a face should have been, there was only smooth, blank skin. A scream caught in my throat as more figures emerged from the darkness. 3, 5, a dozen of them, all bearing that same featureless visage. They began to glide toward us with an unsettling grace, their whispers not quite forming words, growing louder. We ran, branches whipping at our faces as we tore through the underbrush, blind panic propelling us forward. I could hear them behind us, moving through the forest with an inhuman speed, while the symbols on the trees seemed to watch in silence. In the stillness of the night, a glow emerged from the darkness, pulsing rhythmically with an otherworldly chant that enveloped the air around us. Time slipped away, and we ran through the nightmare of the forest, minutes blending into hours, each moment stretching into an eternity. Then, as if by some miracle, we stumbled onto a paved road. We didn't pause until we reached Liam's car, parked patiently at the trailhead. As we sped away, I cast a glance back at the forest. For a fleeting moment, I thought I caught sight of those blank faces peering at us from the shadows between the trees, but just as quickly, they vanished, leaving behind only the ordinary stillness of the woods. Once more, we made our way to the ranger station, recounting our tale to officers whose expressions grew more doubtful with each word. They scoured the area we had described, yet found nothing unusual. No symbols, no clearings, no sign that anything out of the ordinary had transpired. A part of me wished to convince myself that it had all been a figment of our imagination, perhaps a shared hallucination born from fatigue and thirst. But deep down, I know what I witnessed, what I experienced. 6 months have passed since that fateful day, and neither Liam nor I have dared to step into a forest again since then. Let me share a tale, one that whispers of unease and shadows. There's a certain look that lingers in his eyes, a reflection of the same dread that creeps into my heart whenever I gaze at the trees that stand sentinel along my suburban street. They seem to beckon with secrets, and I can't help but wonder what might be concealed within their depths. This story serves as a gentle caution. Should you ever wander into Allegheny National Forest, or any wild place for that matter, and you begin to notice peculiar symbols etched into the bark, heed this warning. Do not brush them aside. Do not chuckle at their strangeness as we once did. Instead, turn back, retrace your steps, and leave while you still have the chance. For there are things in this world that are best left undisturbed. There are things that defy explanation, lurking in the deep, dark corners of the forest. They are always watching, always waiting for unsuspecting travelers to stray just a bit too far from the familiar path. If you happen to hear whispers in the woods, almost resembling words, it's best to run and not look back. In some forests, losing your way is merely the beginning of your troubles. The scratching began on the second night. Initially, I told myself it was merely a raccoon or a curious bear. But when I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, as I stood there, face to face with those glowing, inhuman eyes, a chilling realization washed over me. Our family camping trip had transformed into a desperate fight for survival. My name is Daniel, a 35-year-old software engineer hailing from the suburbs of Portland. My wife, Olivia, and I had longed to introduce our children, 10-year-old Sophia and 8-year-old Liam, to the wonders of the great outdoors. Both of us had fond memories of camping from our own childhoods, and we were eager to share that experience with them. So, we loaded our minivan with a tent, sleeping bags, and enough supplies for a long weekend in the enchanting yet eerie Olympic National Forest. The first day unfolded with a sense of adventure and excitement. In a serene setting, we discovered a hidden campsite beside a gentle brook. We pitched our tent and spent the afternoon wandering through the woods, learning about the various plants around us. Sophia, with her keen eye, delighted in identifying the trees and flowers, while Liam found joy in skipping stones across the water, his laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. As darkness enveloped the landscape, we gathered around the flickering campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing tales. The children gazed up in wonder at the vast, starry sky, a sight so different from their usual view. Olivia and I shared knowing glances, savoring the magic of the moment. Satisfied smiles graced our faces, for this was precisely what we had envisioned. We all turned in early, weary from the day's adventures. The gentle sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, wrapped around us like a comforting blanket, lulling us into a deep sleep. It was serene, idyllic, until the tranquility shattered. The scratching stirred me awake in the early hours of the morning. At first, it was faint, barely cutting through the soothing nighttime symphony of the forest. Yet it was relentless. Rhythmic scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause. I lay there for a while, listening intently as it seemed to grow closer. As I lay there, a sound emerged from the side of the tent, perhaps just a curious animal. I reassured myself, nothing to worry about. Yet, as the minutes passed, the scratching grew louder, more insistent. I sensed Olivia stirring beside me. "Daniel," she whispered, "do you hear that?" I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me in the enveloping darkness. "Yeah," I whispered back, "probably just a raccoon. I'll check it out." I fumbled for the flashlight we had left by our sleeping bag and slowly unzipped the tent flap. The beam of light sliced through the darkness, illuminating the unknown beyond. The trees stood tall and silent, their shadows weaving a tapestry of darkness around me. The scratching had ceased, as if the night itself held its breath. Just as I was about to secure the tent, a flicker caught my eye at the periphery of the flashlight's beam. My heart raced as I turned the light in that direction. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed a pair of eyes, glimmering in the dark. They were too high for a raccoon, too large for a deer, and the glow was unlike anything I had ever seen. An unsettling, almost phosphorescent green that sent a chill down my spine. It had vanished, leaving me to ponder whether I had conjured it from my imagination. I swiftly zipped the tent back up, attempting to soothe Olivia with my words. "I didn't see anything," I said, striving to keep my voice calm. "It probably just ran off when it heard me." Though she didn't seem entirely reassured, we both eventually surrendered to sleep. The remainder of the night unfolded quietly, without further incident. As dawn broke, I found myself frequently scanning the tree line, searching for something I couldn't quite define. Meanwhile, the children, blissfully unaware of the previous night's unease, were reveling in their morning adventures. As we spent the day fishing in the stream, the afternoon led us on another hike. Yet, an unsettling sensation lingered, as if unseen eyes were upon us. More than once, I caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision, but each time I turned, nothing awaited me. Olivia, ever perceptive, noticed my growing unease. "Everything okay?" she inquired while we prepared dinner. I mustered a smile, replying, "Yeah, just a bit tired, I guess. Didn't sleep great last night." Her gaze told me she sensed my discomfort, yet she chose not to press further. That night, as we gathered around the fire, the shadows danced, and the air felt thick with unspoken stories. As the campfire crackled softly, Sophia suddenly pointed into the darkness. "Dad, what's that?" I followed her gaze, my heart quickening. Just beyond the warm glow of the firelight, a pair of glowing green eyes watched us, the same ones I had glimpsed the night before. "Everyone in the tent now," I urged, striving to keep my voice steady. "But Dad," Liam began to protest. I repeated my command more firmly, while Olivia gently ushered the kids into the safety of the tent. Grabbing a burning branch from the fire, I held it out in front of me like a shield. The eyes had vanished, but I remained alert, the night still cloaked in mystery. In the stillness of the night, a rustling sound emerged from the underbrush, something moving in a deliberate circle around our campsite. I took cautious steps backward, my gaze flitting from one shadow to another. Just as I reached the tent flap, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the air, an unsettling sound, neither fully animal nor entirely human. It sent a shiver down my spine. With a quick motion, I slipped into the tent, zipping it up tightly behind me. Olivia's eyes met mine, wide with fear, while the kids, sensing our unease, huddled close together. "What's going on, Dad?" Sophia whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words to share without adding to their fear. "There's something out there," I finally said. "Probably just a curious bear, but we need to stay in the tent, okay?" Liam's lower lip quivered, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Olivia wrapped her arms around him, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie. We're safe in here." But even as she spoke, the scratching began again, louder this time, more deliberate. It circled the tent, as if whatever lurked outside was probing for weaknesses. We huddled together in the center, the shadows around us deepening. As the scratching echoed and a bone-chilling growl pierced the night, the children whimpered softly, and I could sense Olivia trembling beside me. Suddenly, a shadow loomed across the tent wall, something large lurking just outside. We could hear its heavy, ragged breaths, unlike any creature I had ever known. Then came a new sound, sniffing with long, deep inhalations, as if it were searching for us. The shadow shifted, and for a heart-stopping moment, I feared it would rip through the tent fabric. Instead, it released another low growl, sending shivers down our spines. We remained still, our breaths held tight, as time stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The familiar sounds of the forest began to seep back in, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. When dawn finally broke, I slowly unzipped the tent and peeked outside. The campsite appeared ordinary in the soft morning light, yet as I stepped out, a chill gripped me. There, in the soft earth surrounding our tent, were tracks, large, deep impressions that sent a shiver down my spine. They were not bear tracks or any creature I could identify. They resembled something almost human. Footprints, larger than any we had seen before, bore long, curved claw marks at the end of each toe. Stuck to one of the tent poles was a clump of coarse, dark hair. "We're leaving," I announced, my voice trembling slightly. We packed up in record time, the kids unusually quiet and compliant. As we drove away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something emerge from the trees. We never returned to that campsite, nor did we go camping again. The kids were disappointed at first, but as they grew older, we finally shared the story with them. It was a night like no other, one that would linger in the minds of those who experienced it. They came to understand the weight of the darkness that surrounded them, a darkness that seemed to breathe and watch. Countless hours were spent in quiet contemplation, searching for answers to the mysteries they encountered. Tales of Bigfoot, Wendigos, and skinwalkers danced through their thoughts, yet none seemed to capture the essence of that night. What they knew for certain was that the wilderness held secrets, ancient and unfathomable, reminding them that despite our advancements, we are not the ultimate rulers of every realm. So, if you find yourself drawn to the allure of the New England, tread carefully, for the shadows may hold more than you can imagine. Be cautious, my friend, and stay alert. If you hear a scratching sound outside your tent in the stillness of the night, and if you catch a glimpse of glowing green eyes lurking in the shadows, do not dismiss it as mere imagination. For sometimes, the monsters that haunt our thoughts are all too real, and they come with an insatiable hunger. The first time I heard a voice crackling through the CB radio, I assumed it was just another stranded motorist seeking help. Little did I know, I was already spiraling into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. They say that the life of a long-haul trucker can drive a person to madness, but I never anticipated it would unfold in such a chilling manner. To the brink of my endurance. My name is Liam, and for nearly 20 years, I have traversed this vast country, my truck carrying everything from fresh produce to auto parts. Along the way, I have encountered my fair share of peculiar occurrences. Ghostly trucks, mysterious lights dancing in the sky, and even what I firmly believe was a genuine UFO. Yet, nothing could have steeled me for the events that unfolded one fateful night in the remote backcountry of Wyoming. It began as an ordinary run, with my cargo securely loaded, electronics from Portland to Chicago, taking the northern route through Idaho and Wyoming. It was late October, and winter was approaching swiftly in the mountains. The forecast had warned of an early snowstorm, but I believed I could outpace it if I drove through the night. I had just crossed the Idaho-Wyoming border when the snow began. At first, it was merely a few flakes, nothing to be concerned about. However, within an hour, it transformed into a full-blown blizzard. The world outside my windshield became a swirling mass of white, my headlights struggling to penetrate the thickening storm. Gloom enveloped the night as I contemplated pulling over to wait it out. Suddenly, a crackle of static broke the silence on my CB radio, followed by a voice piercing through the white noise. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? I need help." The voice was young, female, and laced with terror. I had encountered my fair share of distress calls over the years, but something about this one sent an unsettling chill down my spine, one that had little to do with the storm raging outside. I keyed the mic. "This is Big Liam. What's your situation?" "Oh, thank God," the voice replied, relief palpable in her tone. "My car broke down. Amidst the tempest, I find myself adrift, uncertain of my surroundings. A sign for Route 87 flickered past me not long ago, a fleeting reminder of the path I once traveled. Yet, the memory of any turnoff eludes me, as if swallowed by the storm. I take a deep breath, urging myself to remain composed. "I'm on 87 now," I reassure, my voice steady. "Can you see the highway from where you are?" Her response trembles, a whisper against the howling wind. "I think so," she replies, her words laced with fear. "There are many trees, but sometimes I catch glimpses of lights through the swirling snow. Please, you must help me. I'm so cold." Each instinct, sharpened by years of survival, stirs within me, urging me to act. The road whispered warnings, a chilling reminder that something was amiss. Yet I couldn't turn my back on someone in distress. That's not in my nature. "I'm going to find you," I reassured, urging her to keep speaking. "What's your name?" "Olivia," she replied, her voice trembling. "Please hurry." I eased my rig down, straining to catch a glimpse of any stranded vehicle amidst the storm. The wind howled, rocking the truck as visibility dwindled to near nothingness. "Olivia, I need your help to find you," I called out. "Can you see my headlights? Can you hear my engine?" There was a pause that stretched longer than I would have preferred. Then I thought I saw something, yes, lights drawing nearer. Yet all I could make out was the swirling snow and the indistinct forms of trees. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. "I don't see any sign of a car." Olivia's voice shifted, tinged with urgency, almost frantic. "You're so close, just a little further. Turn right up ahead." I frowned, for there was no right turn in sight, at least not on any map I was familiar with, just endless miles of unbroken forest. "Olivia, there's no turn here," I replied, a chill creeping into my tone. "Are you certain of your location?" Another pause lingered, stretching so long that I feared we had lost the connection entirely. Then, Olivia's voice returned, but it was altered, deeper, almost growling. "Turn right, Liam. Turn right now." A chill, unrelated to the storm, slithered down my spine. I eased off the accelerator, my knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. "Who is this?" I demanded, my heart racing. "What's going on here?" The laugh that emerged from the radio speaker was anything but human. It was a low, guttural sound that sent shivers across my skin. "Oh, Liam," the voice whispered, all. With the pretense of being Olivia faded away, the moment had come to make a choice. I should have turned right, but now we were faced with a more challenging path. Suddenly, my headlights pierced through the swirling snow, revealing a figure standing motionless ahead. It was vaguely humanoid, yet too tall and too thin, and its eyes, oh, those eyes, glowed with an unsettling greenish light. I yanked the wheel hard, sending my rig into a skid, the world spinning around me as I fought for control. In that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of the figure, its arms stretching out with impossibly long, clawed fingers reaching for my truck. As I navigated the treacherous icy road, my vehicle fishtailed wildly, each moment a battle against the forces threatening to send me careening out of control. With every ounce of strength, I fought to regain my grip, my heart racing as if it might leap from my chest. I pressed down hard on the accelerator, urging my rig to defy the limits of safety in these perilous conditions. In the side mirror, a shadow darted through the trees, moving with an unsettling speed that sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, the crackle of the CB broke the silence, a voice dripping with menace. "You can't run, Liam. We know these woods. We know all." As I navigated the roads, seeking every shortcut, I turned off the radio. Yet the voice persisted, echoing from the very air that surrounded me. "We've been so hungry, Liam, so very hungry, and you're going to feed us one way or another." I drove with a frantic urgency, taking turns too swiftly, skimming the edge of control. More than once, I felt the trailer begin to sway, threatening to send me off the road, but somehow I managed to hold it together. Hours slipped by in a haze of white snow and dark dread. I dared not stop, nor even slow my pace. Each time I believed I had escaped their grasp, a flicker of glowing eyes in the woods would catch my attention, or that haunting voice would echo from the radio. As dawn broke, I finally emerged from the mountains and onto the open plains, the storm now behind me and the road ahead clear. I pulled into the first truck stop I encountered, my hands trembling so fiercely that I struggled to turn off the engine. It took 3 cups of coffee before my thoughts began to settle. The locals regarded me with curious glances. I must have appeared quite the sight, wild-eyed and rambling about the voices that haunted me. The radio crackled softly, and the shadows of the woods loomed large. Most dismissed my tale as that of a weary trucker, lost in the grip of exhaustion and imagination. Yet one old-timer, a weathered man named Bill, lent me his ear. His face was etched with lines of experience, and he listened intently, a grave look settling upon his features. "You're not the first to encounter them," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "Those woods, there's something wrong in them, something ancient and ravenous." He offered no further words, merely shaking his head before retreating into the night, leaving me with a swirl of unanswered questions. I picked up the phone to call my dispatcher, my mind racing as I declared my intention to take a different path. There was a week spent in a motel, where every shadow seemed to dance and whisper, leaving me on edge until I found my footing once more. When I finally returned to the road, I chose the southern route, steering clear of those Wyoming woods that still haunt my thoughts. Late at night, as I drive and the CB remains silent, I sometimes hear a voice, a young woman, it seems, calling for help. I've learned not to respond anymore, for I know now that on those long, dark roads, not every plea is genuine. Sometimes, the voice that reaches out from the static is not human at all, and that knowledge lingers like a chill in the air. Sometimes, the true terrors are not those we can easily perceive. Picture this. You find yourself navigating the snowy roads of Wyoming on a quiet night. Suddenly, a desperate voice crackles through your radio. Resist the urge to stop, to respond, or even to turn right. For in that enveloping darkness, there are entities that linger, always yearning, skilled in the art of deception. The first image that appeared was merely a blur, a shadowy figure among the trees. I brushed it off as a glitch, a flaw of the inexpensive trail camera. Yet, as the images continued to unfold, as the nights unfolded, the figure emerged more distinctly, inching ever closer. On that fateful night, I awoke to the chilling sight of my camera, marred by claw marks, lying shattered beside my tent. In that moment, the realization struck me. I was not merely documenting wildlife. I was the prey. My name is Natalie, and I was once a wildlife photographer, devoted to capturing the essence of endangered species. For years, I had traversed jungles and scaled mountains, immortalizing images of creatures teetering on the edge of extinction. Yet it was the whisper of a classified species in the New England that lured me into this haunting tale. Ventured into the heart of North Cascades National Park, stepping into a realm where shadows danced and the air was thick with mystery. It began as a simple curiosity, sparked by whispers in cryptozoology forums about sightings of an elusive primate lurking in the dense forests of Washington state. While most serious scientists brushed it off as another Bigfoot hoax, the descriptions lingered in my mind, distinct from the familiar tales of Sasquatch. This creature was said to be smaller, more agile, adorned with strange bioluminescent markings. With a sense of intrigue guiding me, I packed my gear and set off into the unknown. As I ventured into the wilderness, I discovered a hidden nook deep within the forest, far removed from any hiking trail, a perfect sanctuary for my equipment, shielded from the presence of others. The initial days passed quietly. I pitched my tent, explored the surroundings, and carefully placed my trail cameras in thoughtful locations. Each day, I wandered through the verdant woods, capturing images of its familiar residents: elk, black bears, and the rare sighting of a cougar. When night fell, I would sit in the stillness, reviewing the footage from my cameras, yearning for a glimpse of the elusive creatures that roamed the shadows. It was on the fourth night that I first caught sight of it. A dark blur at the edge of the frame, there one moment and gone the next. I nearly overlooked it, dismissing it as a mere glitch or perhaps a bat flitting past the lens. Yet, something urged me to pause, to rewind and examine it more closely. There was a shape to the blur, a hint of a form that was neither human nor any creature I could name. A tingle of excitement coursed through me. Could this be the very thing I had come to find? The following night, it returned, and this time the image was clearer. A hunched figure moving on all fours, but in a manner that felt distinctly unsettling. There was something unsettling about the scene, an unnatural quality that sent a shiver down my spine. Faint glowing spots flickered along its flank, barely visible in the dim light. My heart raced with excitement. This was it, the proof of an undiscovered species I had long sought. All I needed were clearer images, definitive evidence. Yet, as the days slipped by and I pored over each night's footage, my thrill began to morph into a creeping unease. The creature appeared more frequently, inching closer to my cameras, closer to my camp. One image in particular haunted me. The creature, now unmistakably visible, was staring directly into the lens, its gaze piercing through the darkness. As I lay in the stillness of the night, the camera's eyes reflected an eerie red glow, a haunting reminder of the intelligence that lurked within. It wasn't the vacant gaze of a mere animal. There was something more, perhaps curiosity, or even a hint of malice. I tried to convince myself that I was merely projecting human traits onto a creature, yet a nagging feeling told me otherwise. A week into my stay, I was jolted awake by an unsettling sound, a chittering that resonated like insects but was deeper, more guttural. It was alarmingly close, just beyond the thin fabric of my tent. My heart raced as I lay there, frozen in the darkness. As I dared to breathe, something moved past the tent, its shadow dancing across the thin fabric. I could hear it sniffing, taking long, deep inhalations, and then there was silence. What felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, passed before I heard it move away, the underbrush rustling softly as it retreated into the depths of the forest. When morning finally arrived, I discovered prints encircling my tent. They were unlike anything I had ever encountered, vaguely hand-like, yet adorned with long, curving claws at the end of each digit. My hands trembled as I meticulously photographed them, the camera feeling heavy with the weight of the unknown. It was my signal to gather my things and depart. Any rational individual would have fled the scene, but I found myself unable to leave, not when the promise of a monumental discovery lay just within reach. So I remained. I relocated my tent, arranged additional cameras, and began to sleep with my largest knife nearby, though I questioned its effectiveness against a being capable of tearing through canvas as if it were mere paper. With each passing night, the images captured by my trail cameras grew sharper, more unsettling. I became increasingly certain that there was only one creature, and it was larger than I had ever imagined. At first, I believed its body was cloaked in a peculiar, mottled fur, adorned with bioluminescent patches that glimmered gently in the infrared images. Its face was a haunting sight, almost human in shape, yet marred by a protruding snout brimming with sharp teeth and those keen, hungry eyes. It seemed to be scrutinizing my cameras, and in some images it appeared to study them intently, tilting its head as if trying to grasp the nature of the device. In others, it gazed beyond the camera, peering towards my camp. I found myself unable to sleep for more than an hour or two at a time. Each snapping twig and rustling leaf would pull me from the depths of sleep, my hand instinctively gripping my knife. Yet, whatever lurked in the shadows never ventured closer than the edges of my camp, at least not while I remained awake. On what I resolved to be my final night, whether it be a creature or merely my own imagination, I could no longer bear the weight of anxiety. I set up one last camera, carefully positioning it to face my tent, hoping to capture any glimpse of the unknown should it dare to approach. I cannot say what stirred me from slumber. There was no sound, no movement that I could detect, only an overwhelming sense of something amiss that jolted me awake. Awakened from slumber, I heard the familiar chittering sound once more. Yet, this time it was not outside the tent. It was right beside me. As I opened my eyes, I found myself gazing directly into the face of a creature, crouched ominously over me. Its hot breath fanned across my skin, carrying the unsettling scent of rotted meat and damp earth. Bioluminescent patches on its body pulsed softly, casting an eerie glow within the confines of the tent. For what felt like an eternity, we remained locked in a silent stare. Fear gripped me, rendering me unable to scream. The creature tilted its head, studying me with those hauntingly intense eyes. Intelligent eyes glinted in the dim light, and with a deliberate grace, it extended a long-fingered hand toward me. It grasped the knife I had been clutching in my sleep, pulling it from my grip with an effortless ease, never breaking our gaze. A chill ran down my spine as I braced myself for the inevitable slash of claws or the snap of teeth. But instead, the creature turned away, moving toward my camera, which stood silently in the shadows. With a swift motion, it raised the knife and brought it crashing down, shattering the device into countless pieces. Then, it turned back to me, emitting a sound that was unlike the chittering I had heard before. Something almost like, in the stillness of the night, a series of clicks and guttural noises echoed, almost as if they were attempting to form words. Then, with a swift motion, it slashed its claws across the tent wall and vanished, leaving me alone in my tattered shelter, surrounded by the remnants of my equipment. The details of packing up elude me, and the journey back to civilization is a blur. My next clear memory finds me in a diner, miles away from the forest, hands trembling as I struggled to hold a cup of coffee. I never spoke of what I encountered. Who would believe me? I had no proof of the creature's existence, yet it had seen me. All my cameras lay in ruins, the images vanished, and even the prints encircling my tent had been erased, as if by a purposeful scraping of the earth. In the years that followed, I have sought to unravel the mystery of that night. Was it truly an undiscovered species, perhaps a primate that had evolved in seclusion? Or was it something altogether different, something that eludes the grasp of scientific understanding? I cannot say for certain, but one truth remains clear. There are forces in this world that remain beyond our comprehension, entities that prefer to remain shrouded in mystery. Sometimes, when we venture into the depths of the unknown, we find that the unknown gazes back at us. Since that fateful night, I have not dared to step into a forest again. I abandoned my passion for wildlife photography and sought refuge in the city, where the only beings I must contend with are of the humankind. Yet, in the stillness of the night, I often awaken in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear that unsettling chittering sound just outside my window. I lie there, frozen in fear, questioning whether I truly escaped that night or if it simply allowed me to leave. And if it did, I can't help but wonder why. For deep within me lingers the unsettling notion that somewhere out there, in the shadows, it waits. In the dark forest of the New England, there lies a presence, quietly observing, perhaps still in pursuit. If you find yourself in the wilderness, setting up trail cameras to catch glimpses of elusive wildlife, tread lightly. Be cautious, for you may not be the only one capturing images. Some sights, once witnessed, linger in the mind forever. I remember the first time I caught a glimpse of a figure flitting between the corn rows. I dismissed it as a trick of the light. Yet, by the time I grasped the reality, I was ensnared in an endless maze of shadows. As the night deepened and shadows danced across the land, my phone lay silent, its battery drained. I found myself reflecting on a choice I had made, venturing into that field alone. My name is Elowell, and for as long as I can remember, I've spent my summers working on my uncle's farm, learning the lay of the land. At 17, I believed I knew every inch of those vast cornfields, stretching endlessly under the summer sky. Yet, on that sweltering July evening, I was about to uncover secrets hidden within the farm, secrets that whispered of darkness and mystery. It all began with a malfunctioning irrigation system, something Uncle Dave had noticed in one particular section of the fields. Feld was not receiving enough water, and he requested that I take a look. A simple enough task, I thought, having done it countless times before. I set out just as the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting brilliant shades of orange and pink across the sky. The corn stood tall, easily surpassing my 6-foot frame. I had always cherished these walks through the fields at this time of year, feeling dwarfed by the lush green stalks stretching endlessly in every direction. The problematic section awaited me near the center. As I made my way through the field, a good 10-minute walk lay ahead of me. I moved quickly, eager to finish my task before darkness enveloped the land. The corn rustled around me, the leaves brushing roughly against my bare arms. About halfway to my destination, I heard it, a sound that felt out of place. Not the familiar chorus of crickets or the distant low of cattle, but something else entirely. A skittering noise, as if something was darting through the corn, just beyond my sight. I paused, listening intently. For a moment, there was nothing but the usual sounds of a summer evening. As the evening settled over the farm, a familiar sound reached my ears once more, this time closer. A rush of movement stirred the cornstalks, swaying unnaturally about 20 feet to my left. "Hello!" I called out, my voice feeling small and uncertain in the vastness of the field. "Is someone there?" Silence enveloped me, broken only by another rustle of movement, this time behind me. I turned quickly, my heart beginning to race. That's when I caught a glimpse. a dark figure darting between the rows of corn. It was there and gone in an instant, leaving only an impression of something large moving swiftly through the shadows. A way that felt otherworldly brushed against my senses, and I tried to convince myself it was merely my imagination. Perhaps it was just a deer, or maybe one of the farm dogs had wandered into the field. Yet, deep within, I sensed it was something else entirely. I quickened my pace, no longer drifting but moving with intent toward the irrigation system. The sooner I resolved the issue, the sooner I could escape this field. However, as I walked, a growing disorientation enveloped me. The rows blended into an endless sea of green, and I could have sworn I should have reached my destination by now. The faulty section by now, but there was no sign of it. I pulled out my phone, intending to use the GPS to get my bearings. My stomach dropped when I saw the screen. No signal, and worse, the battery was almost dead. I'd forgotten to charge it last night. That's when I heard the skittering noise again, much closer this time, close enough that I could hear something else beneath the sound of movement. A low, guttural growl that raised the hair on the back of my neck. I started to run, crashing through the corn, no longer caring about anything else. As I navigated the rows, a sense of direction slipped away, and I found myself fleeing from an unseen presence that lingered just behind me. The corn stalks lashed against my face and arms, leaving stinging cuts, yet I pressed on, driven by an instinctual fear. I lost track of time. It could have been mere minutes or perhaps hours, as the green maze enveloped me, distorting my perception. Eventually, breathless and weary, I had to pause. I bent over, hands resting on my knees, struggling to draw in air. The sun hung low in the sky, its light fading swiftly, and as my breathing steadied, a chilling realization washed over me. I could hear nothing at all. Crickets chirped softly, and the air was still, devoid of birdsong, leaving only the sound of my own breath, quick and shallow. Suddenly, a rustle broke the silence right before me. I straightened slowly, my eyes straining against the dim light. The corn parted, and a figure emerged into the small clearing where I stood. My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the sight before me. It was vaguely humanoid, yet something was profoundly wrong. Too tall, too thin, its arms dangled past its knees, ending in hands adorned with long, curved claws. But it was the face that sent a chill through my veins. Where features should have been, there was only emptiness. In the stillness of the night, I found myself face to face with a being of unsettling simplicity. Its skin was smooth and blank, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth, just a featureless oval of pale flesh. I stood there, frozen in place, unable to move or even let out a scream. The creature tilted its head, as if it were studying me, and then, as if defying the very laws of nature, a seam appeared in its flawless face. It split open, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. At that moment, a primal scream erupted from my throat, a sound filled with pure terror that seemed to catch the creature off guard. It flinched back, and I seized the fleeting chance to escape, turning and running without a thought for direction or the path ahead. I felt an urgent need to escape from that presence, crashing through the corn, branches and leaves tearing at me. The sound of its movement echoed behind me, impossibly swift, as if a multitude of creatures were closing in. Just when I thought my legs would fail me, I broke free from the cornfield and stumbled onto the dirt road that bordered the property. In the distance, the lights of the farmhouse beckoned, and I ran towards them, as if my very life depended on reaching their glow. As I reflect on that night, a sense of uncertainty washes over me. I recall stumbling into the kitchen, my words tumbling out in a rush, leaving my aunt and uncle wide-eyed with surprise. Their expressions shifted from concern to alarm as they noticed the scratches and blood that marred my skin. Uncle Dave, ever the protector, grabbed his rifle and ventured out into the fields, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Yet, as he scanned the vast expanse of corn that stretched endlessly before him, He found nothing. No strange creatures lurking in the shadows, no signs of the unusual. Just the whisper of the night and the rustle of the corn, as if the land itself held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. As I wandered through the fields, a sense of disorientation washed over me, mingling with a rising tide of panic. Part of me longed to dismiss it all as a mere hallucination, a trick of the mind fueled by dehydration and fatigue. Yet, deep down, I knew what I had witnessed, what had echoed in the stillness around me, and what had lurked just beyond my sight in that cornfield. A month later, I left for college, departing earlier than I had planned. I told my parents I was eager to settle into my dorm, but the truth was far more unsettling. I could no longer bear the weight of those fields, nor the haunting question of what might be concealed within their shadows. It has been 5 years since that fateful night, and now I find myself nearing the completion of my degree in a city far removed from any cornfields. I believed I had left it all behind, but just last week, a call from my aunt shattered that illusion. Uncle Dave had vanished. He had gone out one evening to check on the irrigation system and never returned. They discovered his truck parked at the edge of the field, yet there was no trace of him. As she spoke, I could sense the panic in her voice, the fear palpable. But beneath that, I caught something else. A faint rustling of corn, whispering through the phone, echoing the past I thought I had escaped. As I traveled back to the farm, a familiar skittering noise echoed in my mind, a sound that has lingered in my nightmares for years. I understand the risks. I know I should keep my distance from those fields. Yet, the pull of family is strong, and I must uncover the truth. So, if you find yourself driving through the serene farm country on a warm summer evening, and you gaze upon a vast expanse of corn reaching toward the horizon, take heed. Not all fields are as they appear, and sometimes the true peril lies not in getting lost among the rows, but in what may be lurking within them. In the quiet of the night, one might find themselves drawn to the cornfields, where something lurks, ever watchful, waiting with an insatiable hunger. It was upon stepping onto that forsaken yacht that an unsettling feeling washed over me. The silence was thick, almost suffocating, and the remnants of a struggle whispered tales of dread. The logbook, filled with frantic entries, hinted at a terror beyond our comprehension. Yet, by the time the true nature of our predicament dawned upon us, it was far too late. We were not alone aboard that spectral vessel, and our unexpected companions had their own plans for us. We were hungry. My name's Andrew, and I've spent nearly 2 decades as a commercial fisherman out of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Over the years, I've encountered my fair share of peculiar occurrences on the water. Freak storms, impossible waves, and even what I could have sworn was a sea monster, though that tale often gets dismissed after a few drinks. Yet, nothing, absolutely nothing, could have readied me for the events that unfolded that day on the Atlantic. It was meant to be just another routine fishing trip with my crew. My first mate, Elowell, and our inexperienced greenhorn, William. As dawn broke, we set out towards our familiar fishing grounds, 100 miles offshore. The weather was perfect, with clear skies and calm seas, and we were filled with anticipation for a good haul. After about 6 hours on the water, Elowell's keen eyes caught sight of something unusual, a yacht drifting aimlessly about half a mile off our starboard side. It was a sizable vessel, perhaps 80 feet long, the kind that costs more than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. "Should we check it out?" William asked, his voice laced with excitement. The kid always had a thirst for the extraordinary. I found myself hesitating. Maritime law dictates that one must assist vessels in distress. Yet an unsettling feeling crept over me. The yacht appeared intact, with no visible damage. Why was there no one on deck? Why hadn't they called for help? Ultimately, my sense of duty prevailed over my apprehension. "Bring us alongside," I instructed Elowell, "but keep the engine running. If anything seems off, we're out of here." As we approached, the strangeness of the situation deepened. The yacht was immaculate, almost too pristine, with no signs of life on deck, no movement at all. It was eerie. It felt as though the boat had been left behind in a rush. We approached cautiously, calling out, but received no answer. I attempted to use the radio, only to be met with an unsettling static. "I don't like this," Andrew Elwell murmured, his weathered face etched with worry. I shared his unease, yet we had come this far. "Let's take a quick look," I suggested. "William, you stay here with the boat. Elwell and I will investigate. If anything happens, anything at all, you radio the Coast Guard and get out of here, understood?" William nodded. His earlier excitement now faded into a quiet apprehension. With a sense of unease, Elwell and I stepped onto the yacht, the soft rhythm of the waves lapping against the hull the only sound accompanying us. The deck was pristine, every rope perfectly in place. Yet as we neared the main cabin, something caught my eye: scratches on the door frame, deep gouges marring the polished wood. I shared a glance with Elwell. He had noticed it too. We both reached for the flimsy knives we carried at our belts. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. I pushed the door open, wincing at the creak of the hinges, and stepped inside. The interior was dim, with shafts of sunlight filtering through, casting eerie shadows around us. Partially closed blinds allowed a sliver of light to filter in as my eyes adjusted to the dimness. The scene before us was unsettling. The main salon lay in disarray, furniture overturned and cushions slashed open. On the plush carpet, dark stains marred the surface, unmistakably blood. "Jesus," Elwell whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "What the hell happened here?" I shook my head, my mouth dry with unease. "Let's check the rest of the boat, quick and quiet. If we find anyone alive, or otherwise, we radio the Coast Guard immediately." We moved through the yacht room by room. The galley was ransacked, cupboards emptied, food scattered haphazardly everywhere. The staterooms awaited our discovery. In a state of disarray, clothes were strewn about, and more of those unsettling blood stains marred the sheets. Yet, it was what we discovered in the captain's quarters that truly sent a chill down my spine. The room remained relatively untouched, save for the desk, where papers were scattered in disarray. At the center lay an open logbook. The early entries spoke of mundane weather reports and course changes, nothing out of the ordinary. However, as we turned the pages, the tone shifted dramatically. The last entry, dated just 2 days ago, was a scroll of barely legible handwriting. Inside the walls, a chill crept through the air. "God help us, they're inside the walls. If anyone finds this, don't." The entry ended abruptly, a long ink streak trailing off the page. Elwell and I exchanged glances, the same thought reflected in our eyes. We needed to get off this boat, and fast. That's when we heard it. A skittering sound, something shifting within the walls. At first, I dismissed it as rats, but rats don't make the walls bulge and ripple as if something massive were moving through them. "Run!" I yelled, all pretense of stealth forgotten as we burst out of the cabin. In the captain's quarters, a sense of urgency filled the air as we raced for the deck behind us. The sound of tearing metal echoed ominously, a harbinger of something breaking free from its confines. Emerging into the sunlight, we gasped for breath, the weight of fear heavy upon us. William stood at the railing of our boat, his eyes wide with terror. "Start the engine," I bellowed, urgency lacing my voice. We had to leave, but before we could reach our vessel, a sudden eruption from the yacht's deck caught us off guard. The polished wood splintered violently as a creature burst forth, its writhing tentacles and gnashing teeth unlike anything I had ever encountered before. Part octopus, part eel, twisted into something nightmarish and wrong, they poured forth from every opening in the yacht. With terrifying speed, they undulated across the deck towards us. Elwell was closest to our boat. He leaped the gap, landing hard on our deck. I was right behind him, my muscles screaming as I pushed myself to jump farther than I ever had before. I made it barely. Tentacles lashed at my legs as I sailed through the air, but they fell short by inches. Go, go, go! I shouted at William, who was frozen at the wheel. With a face masked in terror, the roar of our engine coming to life jolted him from his trance. He thrust the throttle forward, and we lurched away from the yacht. Yet the creatures were not finished with us. They cascaded over the side of the yacht, plunging into the water and swimming with an eerie swiftness. I could see more of them erupting from the hull beneath the waterline, the yacht's pristine white paint now marred by spreading tendrils of a dark, oily substance. Faster! Elowell shouted, seizing a gaff hook and swinging it at a writhing tentacle. As the creature clung to our stern, William urged our boat to its limits, the engine howling in protest. Slowly, agonizingly, we began to distance ourselves from the writhing mass that pursued us. I couldn't tell how long we ran, hours perhaps. We didn't dare to slow down until the yacht was a distant memory and our fuel gauge hovered perilously low. Only then did we allow ourselves to breathe, to attempt to comprehend the horrors we had witnessed. We reached out to the Coast Guard, trying to convey the unimaginable events that had unfolded. But of course, they didn't believe us. How could they? It all sounded too insane to be true. Even to us, it felt surreal, as if we had stepped into a tale woven with shadows. They dispatched a cutter to investigate, but by the time they arrived at the coordinates we provided, the sea was eerily calm. No sign of the yacht, no debris, no oil slick, nothing to suggest a vessel had ever graced those waters. Upon our return to port, we found ourselves under the scrutiny of the authorities, who questioned us for hours, their minds racing with thoughts of drugs or smuggling. They struggled to comprehend our story, the strange events that had unfolded. In the end, they released us, citing a lack of evidence. But the weight of the unknown lingered in the air, heavy and unsettling. It began as mere chatter among fishermen, their minds perhaps clouded by the sun's relentless rays. Yet, deep down, I know what I witnessed, what we all witnessed. There exists something in the Atlantic, an entity that feels utterly out of place in our world. It has the uncanny ability to invade a ship, hollowing it out from within, lying in wait for those unsuspecting souls. Since that fateful day, I can no longer bring myself to venture onto the water. Elowell and William share my sentiment. We've all sought refuge on land, as far from the ocean's grasp as possible. Yet, in the stillness of the night, I find myself haunted by the echoes of that experience. In the stillness of the night, a skittering sound echoes, as if something is stirring within the walls. I lie awake, pondering whether we truly escaped that day, or if we inadvertently brought something back with us. If you ever find yourself on the ocean and encounter a drifting boat, pristine and seemingly abandoned, heed this warning. Do not approach it, do not board it. Instead, run as fast and as far as you can. For some ghost ships are not empty, and some nightmares linger long after you believe you've escaped. The moment our flashlights began to flicker, a chilling realization settled in. We had made a terrible mistake. In the stillness of the night, the darkness of the abandoned mind wrapped around us, a living entity, both hungry and alive. As the last flicker of light faded, we were enveloped in pitch blackness. It was then that I heard it, a sound, ancient and filled with anger, stirring from the depths. My name is Caleb, and for nearly a decade, I have wandered the forgotten paths of urban exploration. There is an intoxicating thrill in uncovering the secrets hidden within abandoned places, in walking where few have dared to tread for years, perhaps even centuries. Yet, our expedition into the old Holloway Silver took a turn into the unknown. It was destined to be my final adventure, beginning as so many tales do with a whisper. Rumors floated through the message boards, speaking of an extensive network of tunnels hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, lying dormant since the mine's enigmatic closure in 1923. The narratives diverged. Some claimed the miners had discovered a lucrative new vein just before the shutdown, while others insisted they had unearthed something far more sinister than silver, something that prompted the government to seal the mine away. Whatever the reality, the allure was irresistible. I assembled a small team, my trusted companions. As we ventured forth, my partner Ella and I were joined by a local guide named Andrew, who spoke with a knowing confidence about a hidden path. We gathered our gear, reassuring ourselves of our readiness for whatever lay ahead, and stepped into the embrace of the wilderness. The entrance to the mine was shrouded, obscured by a wild tangle of overgrown plants, with old warning signs barely discernible, worn by the passage of time. Andrew led us to a part of the hillside that seemed unremarkable, yet with a gentle push, he parted the curtain of vines, revealing a narrow opening. "This is an old air shaft," he said, his voice carrying a hint of thrill, as if we were on the brink of uncovering a long-forgotten secret. The entrance had collapsed decades ago, yet this path promised to lead us deep into the heart of the mine. We switched on our headlamps and entered in single file, the beam of light from my lamp appearing almost feeble against the immense darkness that lay ahead. The air was cool and damp, thick with the musty scent of long-abandoned spaces. For the first hour, all went smoothly as we marveled at the old equipment left behind. Rusted carts and pickaxes, frozen in time. Ella captured the moment with her camera, the flash briefly illuminating the vast chambers around us. Carved out of the living rock, we ventured deeper into the tunnels, and an uneasy feeling began to settle over me. The passages twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, leading us ever downward. There was something unsettling about the darkness. It seemed to swallow our light, pressing in around the edges of our beams as if it were trying to consume them. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Ella whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. I was about to dismiss her concern when I caught a flicker of movement just ahead. At the edge of my light's beam, I swung my flashlight toward the shadows, but there was nothing there, only more darkness. "It's probably just bats," Andrew said, though his voice lacked conviction. We pressed on, the uneasy feeling swelling with each step. That's when our lights began to falter. It started slowly. My headlamp dimmed, then brightened again. Ella's flashlight flickered in and out. We all checked our batteries, fresh ones we had installed just before entering the mine. "This doesn't make sense," I murmured. As I tapped my lamp, I hoped it would last for days. In an eerie twist, all our lights extinguished at once, enveloping us in complete darkness. For a moment, we stood frozen, disoriented by the sudden absence of light. Then Ella broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "Okay, very funny, guys. Who turned out the lights?" But it wasn't a joke. No matter what we tried, none of our lights would flicker back to life, and even the screen of my phone remained stubbornly dark. "Everyone stay calm," I urged, striving to keep the tremor from my voice. Let's just stay put for now." In a moment, our eyes would surely adjust, but they did not. The darkness enveloped us, a heavy blanket pressing against my eyelids, rendering even the outstretched hand before my face invisible. It was then that we heard it, a sound emerging from the depths of the mine. At first, it was a mere whisper, a scraping noise, like stone grinding against stone. But it grew louder, inching closer. "What is that?" Ella whispered, her voice quaking with unease. Before I could respond, another sound joined the first, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to resonate through the very rock surrounding us. There was a sound that seemed out of place, ancient and hungry, undeniably alive. "Run!" I shouted, reaching for Ella's hand in the enveloping darkness. Together, we fled blindly through the tunnels, one hand brushing against the rough wall for guidance. The sounds behind us intensified, now joined by the unmistakable noise of something large moving through the shafts, something that was gaining on us. I couldn't tell how long we ran. Time had lost all meaning in that lightless maze. We stumbled over unseen obstacles, scraping against jagged rocks, all the while haunted by that terrible sound. As the sound grew ever closer, my outstretched hand met only empty air. We had reached some kind of chamber. The echoes of our panicked breathing hinted at its vastness. "Stop!" I gasped. "We need to figure out where we are." As we stood there, gulping in the air, I sensed a change in the atmosphere. The air felt different here, less stale, with a faint breeze that hinted at a connection to the surface. I think we might be near an exit," I said, hope rising in my chest. But that hope was short-lived, for at that moment, the moment we heard it again, that grinding, rumbling sound, it was no longer just behind us. It surrounded us, echoing from every direction. Then, impossibly, we saw light. Not the warm, comforting glow of the sun or our flashlights, but a cold, pale bioluminescence that seemed to seep from the very walls of the chamber. As our eyes adjusted to this faint illumination, I found myself longing for the darkness once more, for now we could see what had been pursuing us. They were everywhere, creatures that defied description, like a nightmarish vision come to life. The fusion of insect and reptile, their segmented bodies clung to the walls and ceiling, each easily the size of a car. Multifaceted eyes glowed with an alien intelligence, fixed unblinkingly upon us. Yet it was the largest creature that drew our terrified gaze. It sat in the center of the chamber, a monstrosity that dwarfed its brethren. Its massive jaws worked slowly, grinding the stones it seemed to feed upon. This, I realized with dawning horror, was the source of the grinding sound we'd heard, for a moment that felt like an eternity. In the stillness of the night, we found ourselves frozen, gripped by an unshakable terror as the creatures observed us with their cold, alien curiosity. Then, as if summoned by some unseen force, they began to advance. What followed is now a blur in my memory. Screams filled the air, perhaps mine, perhaps Ella's or Andrew's. We ran, abandoning any sense of direction, driven solely by the desperate need to escape the horrors that pursued us. By some stroke of luck, we stumbled upon another tunnel and sprinted down its dark passage, the scrabbling sounds of our pursuers echoing ominously behind us. Just when I thought my legs would give out, I spotted it, a faint pinprick of light. As we emerged from the depths of the mine, the natural light enveloped us, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just escaped. Gasping and stumbling, we didn't pause until we reached our car, parked what felt like miles away on a desolate dirt road. As we sped away, I cast a glance back at the mountain that cradled the Holloway mine. For a fleeting moment, I thought I caught sight of something large and insect-like retreating into the shadows of the entrance we had just vacated. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving me with a lingering doubt. Had I truly seen it, or was it merely a figment of my imagination? We drove straight to We found ourselves at the nearest police station, recounting our tale to officers whose skepticism grew with each passing moment. They searched the area we described, yet discovered nothing unusual. No strange creatures lurking in the shadows, no vast chambers illuminated by eerie bioluminescence. Just an old, abandoned mine, slowly being reclaimed by nature. A part of me wishes to dismiss it all as a mere hallucination, a shared delusion conjured by the darkness and thin mountain air. Yet, deep down, I know what I witnessed, what I heard, and what I felt in those lightless tunnels. Since then, I've steered clear of exploration, unable to venture forth again. Venture into a dark basement these days, you might find that Ella and Andrew share the same hesitation. We've all discovered new hobbies and passions that keep us anchored in the light. Yet, in the stillness of the night, I sometimes awaken in a cold sweat. In those fleeting moments between sleep and wakefulness, I could swear I hear it, the grinding, rumbling sound. I lie there, heart racing, pondering whether we truly escaped that day or if we inadvertently brought something back with us, something that is gradually making its way to the surface. So, If you ever feel the urge to, as you venture into the depths of an abandoned mine, a shiver runs down your spine, for you are about to uncover the dark secrets that lie beneath the earth. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed, and once you glimpse the shadows, they linger in your mind, haunting your thoughts. The true terrors often do not lurk in the corners. They are the very shadows themselves, ever hungry for more. It was in that unsettling silence that I first sensed something was amiss. No footsteps echoed in the hallway, no distant laughter from neighboring rooms, just an oppressive quiet that enveloped me. By the time the truth dawned upon me, it was already too late. It was too late. I found myself ensnared in a nightmare, with the hotel itself acting as my captor. My name is Ryan, and I was a traveling salesman specializing in medical supplies. I had spent more nights in hotels than in my own bed, crisscrossing the country and living out of a suitcase. I believed I had encountered every type of accommodation, from five-star luxury to roach-infested dives. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for room 313 at the Maple Grove Inn. It was supposed to be just another routine overnight stay, another ordinary chapter in my travels. In a nondescript hotel nestled within an equally unremarkable town, I had driven for hours through an unyielding downpour. The windshield wipers struggled to keep pace with the relentless rain when, at last, I spotted the flickering neon sign of the Maple Grove Inn. Exhausted, I was eager to call it a night. Upon entering, I found the lobby eerily deserted, water dripping from my coat to form a small puddle on the faded carpet. A solitary bell sat on the front desk, and I gave it a gentle ring, the sound reverberating unsettlingly in the stillness. After a moment, a figure emerged from a back room, a tall, gaunt man with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold untold stories of their own. His eyes seemed to pierce through me, and in a dry whisper, he asked if I was checking in. I nodded, trying to suppress a shiver. There was something unsettling about this place, but I attributed it to the exhaustion brought on by the gloomy weather. "Just one night," I replied, retrieving my credit card. The clerk's long fingers glided over an ancient-looking computer. "Room 3113, he said, sliding a key across the desk. An actual metal key, not the plastic cards most hotels use these days. "Third floor, elevators to your left." I took the key, noticing how cold it felt in my hand. "Thanks," I murmured. "Is there anywhere nearby to grab a bite to eat?" The clerk's face remained impassive. The kitchens were closed, and vending machines stood on each floor. A true dinner of champions. I thanked him and made my way to the elevator, dragging my wheeled suitcase behind me. The elevator creaked and groaned as it ascended to the third floor. When the door slid open, I was once again enveloped by an unsettling silence. Shouldn't there be some noise in a hotel? The distant hum of TVs from other rooms, perhaps the chatter of guests? I proceeded down the dimly lit hallway, the worn carpet muffling my footsteps, each step echoing the stillness around me. Room 313 was nestled at the very end, tucked away in a quiet corner. The key resisted a bit in the lock, but with a gentle jiggle, the door creaked open. Inside, the room was unremarkable, perhaps a touch dated, adorned with floral wallpaper that had seen better days, and a television that seemed to belong to another era. Yet it was clean and the bed appeared inviting enough. I set my suitcase down and sank onto the bed, the weight of the long day settling upon me. I must have drifted off, for the next thing I knew, a sound jolted me awake. Took a moment to gather my senses. There it was, a gentle yet persistent knocking at my door. I turned my gaze to the bedside clock, which read 2:27 a.m. Who could possibly be knocking at this hour? I called out, my voice thick with sleep. Silence answered, only to be broken by another series of knocks, more urgent this time. A sense of unease settled in my stomach as I rose from my bed. I approached the door, yet something held me back. Instead, I pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway outside lay empty, shrouded in shadows. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the remnants of sleep. Perhaps I had imagined the knocking, but even as I stood there, doubt lingered in the air. It was a sound that echoed through the stillness, a familiar yet unsettling noise that returned. But this time it was not from the door. No, it came from the window. A chill ran through me, for I was on the third floor. Slowly, I turned my gaze toward the window. The curtains were drawn, yet I could discern a shadow moving behind them, a shape that resembled a human, but something was off. It was too tall, too thin. I stood there, frozen in place, unable to move or even draw a breath. The knocking persisted, growing louder and more frantic, until, quite suddenly, it ceased. For a long moment, silence enveloped the room. Then, a voice emerged, resonating from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if it were a whisper carried by the night itself. To seep out of the very walls, a whisper beckoned, "Let us in, Ryan. We've been waiting for you." That chilling invitation broke my paralysis. I lunged for the door, yanking it open and bursting into the hallway. I had to escape to find help. But the hallway was wrong. It stretched on endlessly, doors repeating in a maddening loop. I turned back to my room, only to find that 313 had vanished. Every door now bore the same number, Su-0. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, as the hallway twisted and turned, defying the very laws of physics, no matter how far I went. As I searched for the elevator, I found myself drawn to the stairs instead. The air was thick with whispers and scratches, echoing from behind every door. Occasionally, a flicker of movement would catch my eye, a shadow flitting across the hall, a hand extending from a doorway. Yet, each time I turned to confront it, I was met with emptiness. Time slipped away. Perhaps I ran for hours, my legs ached and my lungs cried out for respite. But I pressed on, compelled by a chilling certainty that if I paused, they would close in on me. At last, I found myself before the elevator, and as I stepped inside, I felt a rush of urgency. My finger danced over the lobby button, desperate to escape. Just as the doors began to close, I caught sight of them, figures emerging from the shadows of the rooms, gliding silently down the hallway toward me. Their faces, oh, those haunting faces. But then, with a shudder, the doors sealed shut, cutting off my view. I leaned against the wall, breathless, as the elevator began its descent. For a fleeting moment, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Perhaps this nightmare was finally coming to an end. Perhaps I would reach the lobby and find everything as it should be. But when the doors opened, I realized with a sinking heart that I was not in the lobby at all. I was back where it all began. In room 313, the atmosphere shifted. The wallpaper had transformed into something unsettling, revealing a pulsing, organic material beneath. The bed seemed to writhe as if it possessed a life of its own, the sheets twisting like tentacles. And there, reflected in the mirror, stood a figure that wore my face, yet it was not me. Its eyes were black voids, endless and hungry, and it smiled, revealing too many sharp, gleaming teeth. "Welcome home, Ryan," it said, its voice a haunting chorus of whispers. "We've been waiting so long." I screamed, a raw sound that tore through my throat, tasting the metallic tang of blood, as the room closed in around me. Twisted around me, unseen hands reached from the shadows, and then I awoke. I found myself in my car, parked at a rest stop, with rain gently pattering against the windshield. My phone buzzed with a missed call from my boss, inquiring about my absence from the meeting. For a long moment, I sat there, trying to regain my bearings. It had all been a dream, a vivid, terrifying nightmare, but just a dream. I must have pulled over when fatigue took hold, falling asleep at the wheel. I started the car, ready to leave it all behind, but as I pulled away from the rest stop, A chill crept over me when I glimpsed something in my rearview mirror. There, on the back seat, lay an old-fashioned metal key, its tag reading Room 3113, Maple Grove. I drove on, my heart racing, not stopping until I found myself 3 states away. I left my job, sold my house, and changed my name. Hotels have become a distant memory, as I can't bear to even glance at one. The truth lingers in my mind. The Maple Grove Inn is out there, patiently waiting. It may not occupy the same spot, nor bear the same appearance, but it is ever watchful, waiting for its next guest. For anyone who finds themselves wandering the roads late at night, weary and in search of a place to rest, heed this gentle warning. If you come across a hotel that seems unfamiliar, resist the urge to stop, no matter how tired you feel or how fierce the storm rages outside. Keep driving, for some places hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. Within certain walls, the concept of time can stretch into an endless night. The first entry in the journal appeared ordinary, but the final words were a frantic scrawl that sent a chill down my spine, especially when I heard those heavy footsteps approaching. On the cabin's porch, a chill crept over me as I sensed I was trapped in the same nightmare that had ensnared the previous occupant. As the door handle began to turn, a dreadful realization settled in my bones. I would not be leaving these woods alive. My name is Isaac, and until a week ago, I was merely a weary city dweller seeking refuge. When I stumbled upon an ad for a remote cabin rental deep in the Adara, it appeared to be the perfect escape. A month of solitude enveloped by untouched wilderness, free from the distractions of cell service or Wi-Fi. Tether me to the stress of my normal life, just me, the trees, and the promise of peace and quiet. The drive up was long and winding, the roads becoming progressively narrower and rougher. As I left civilization behind, by the time I reached the turnoff for the cabin, the dense forest pressed in on both sides of the dirt road, branches scraping against my car like grasping fingers. The cabin itself was exactly as advertised, rustic, secluded, perched on the edge of a small clearing with a breathtaking view of the mountains. As I unloaded my supplies, I felt a sense of anticipation in the air. As the tension of the past few months began to dissolve, that first evening unfolded like a serene painting. I settled onto the porch, observing the sunset as it brushed the sky with brilliant hues of orange and pink, a glass of whiskey cradled in my hand. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant call of a loon echoing from some hidden lake. This, I mused, was precisely what I needed. It wasn't until I ventured inside to prepare dinner that my gaze fell upon the journal resting on the small writing desk in the corner. A leather-bound notebook, its well-worn cover hinting at stories waiting to be told. With a sense of intrigue, I opened the book. The first entry marked 3 months prior. The journey to the cabin had taken longer than anticipated, yet the profound silence enveloping me was already a reward. I anticipated a fruitful month of writing ahead. The subsequent entries detailed ordinary observations, the weather, notes on local wildlife, and updates on the previous occupant's work. However, as I turned the pages, a subtle change caught my attention. The tone shifted. The entries grew shorter, more fragmented, hinting at something unsettling beneath the surface. As the days passed, a growing sense of unease settled in, weaving itself into the very fabric of my thoughts. 2 weeks in, I found myself haunted by strange noises that echoed through the night. They were unlike any sounds I had ever encountered, almost resembling words, yet spoken in a language foreign to me. I tried to convince myself it was merely the wind, but deep down I knew better. A few days later, the noises crept closer, and I could feel the air grow thick with tension. This was no gentle breeze. It was something else entirely. Today, I caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the clearing. It was far too large to be a deer, and its movements were unsettling, unlike anything a bear would make. What could possibly be lurking out there? The final entry, penned just a week ago, sent a shiver down my spine. It simply read, "It's here. God help me, it's here. Should anyone come across this, do not linger, flee, Flee before the clock strikes 2. The entry concluded abruptly, a long ink streak trailing off the page, as if the writer had been taken by surprise. I closed the journal, my hands trembling ever so slightly. Surely, this must be some sort of jest, a prank devised by the owner to unsettle the townsfolk. Yet, deep within, I sensed the truth. The fear woven into those final entries was too palpable, too genuine. I contemplated leaving at that very moment, but the darkness had already settled in, and the thought of navigating those perilous mountain roads under the cloak of night filled me with trepidation. I decided to stay the night and leave first thing in the morning. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the cabin's old timbers, every rustle from the forest outside, had me sitting bolt upright, straining my ears. But eventually, exhaustion won out, and I fell into a fitful slumber. I woke to silence. Not the peaceful quiet of the previous evening, but a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. No birdsong, no insects buzzing, not even the whisper of wind through the trees. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Its breath lingered in the air as I rose, my movements feeling oddly heavy, as though I were wading through water. The morning light filtering through the windows appeared dim and gray, despite the clear sky outside. That's when I noticed it. A footprint in the dirt just outside the cabin's front window. A massive print, easily twice the size of my own foot, with long, curved claw marks at the end of each toe. My breath caught in my throat. This couldn't be real. There was no creature in these woods capable of leaving a mark like that, unless I recalled the journal of the... As the writer's heart raced, a sense of dread filled the air, too intense to be merely a deer, too erratic for a bear. I stepped back from the window, my pulse quickening, feeling an urgent need to escape. In a flurry, I tossed my belongings into my bag, the chaos of my packing reflecting the turmoil within. With each passing moment, I cast anxious glances outside, half expecting a monstrous figure to materialize from the shadows of the trees. Just as I was about to dash for my car, I heard it, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to echo from every direction, a sound that felt ancient and utterly out of place in this world. Hungry and undeniably alive, I froze my hand on the doorknob. The growl came again, closer this time, and then footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from the other side of the cabin. With a jolt of terror, I realized they were circling around towards the front porch. I backed away from the door, looking frantically for a weapon, an escape route, anything, but there was nowhere to go. The footsteps grew louder, the floorboards of the porch creaking under immense weight, then silence for a long moment. Nothing moved. I stood there, scarcely daring to. With a steady breath, my gaze remained fixed on the door as the handle began to turn, slowly and inexorably. I wish I could say I faced whatever awaited me on the other side with courage, that I stood my ground and fought. But the truth is, blind panic seized me. I ran, bursting through the back door and sprinting toward the trees. Behind me, I heard the front door splinter, followed by a roar that shook the very air. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. I just ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every frantic step. I had no idea where I was heading. As I moved through the shadows of the forest, my only thought was to distance myself from the cabin that had become a source of dread. Time slipped away, lost in the endless green maze that surrounded me. Eventually, my legs could carry me no longer, and I found myself leaning against a sturdy tree, gasping for breath as the panic began to fade. In that moment of clarity, I understood the gravity of my mistake. I had fled deeper into the wilderness, now hopelessly lost. With no supplies, no phone, and no means to call for help, I felt the weight of fear settle in, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, something was hunting me. The rest of that day stretched on, filled with an unsettling silence and the rustle of unseen things lurking just beyond my sight. Drifting through a haze of fear and exhaustion, I sought the path back to the road or any hint of civilization. The forest, cloaked in darkness, seemed to blend into one indistinguishable shadow. As night deepened, the chill in the air intensified, accompanied by a gentle rain that began to fall. I found refuge beneath a large tree, shivering, straining my ears for any sign of pursuit. Yet, all that reached me was the soft patter of rain on leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. Just as I teetered on the edge of an exhausted slumber, a flicker of light caught my eye through the trees. Hope surged within me. A house, a road, a way back to safety. As I stumbled toward the light, my fatigue faded away, replaced by a flicker of hope. Drawing closer, I discerned a structure that made my heart leap. It was a cabin. Somehow, I had made a vast circle and returned to where I began. Relief washed over me as I burst into the clearing, but it vanished just as swiftly. This wasn't my cabin. It was similar, yet older, more weathered. There, carved into the door with jagged, desperate strokes, was a chilling message. "Don't enter. It's still here." I stood there, rain soaking through my clothes, staring in disbelief. As I pen these words, I find myself once more haunted by that low, inhuman growl echoing from just behind me. This entry is being written in a new journal I discovered within this cabin. I am uncertain how long I can remain here or if there is any hope of escape. Should anyone stumble upon this, I implore you to heed my warning. Do not linger in these woods. Do not seek solitude in this forsaken corner of the wilderness. For something ancient resides here, something patient and hungry. Once it becomes aware of your presence, it will never cease its pursuit. So, if you are reading this, run now while you still can, and pray it hasn't already caught your scent. The first time we saw the impossibly tall, thin figure in the distance, we laughed it off as a mirage. By the time we realized the truth, we were hopelessly lost in an endless sea of sand, with something inhuman stalking our every move. As our water supply dwindled under the merciless sun, we began to understand that in this desert, death wasn't the worst fate that could befall us. My name's Caleb, and until 2 weeks ago, I was just your average. As thrill-seeking tourists, my girlfriend Hannah and I had been eagerly planning our Southwest road trip for months, yearning to break free from the dreary Portland winter in search of sun and adventure. We had carefully mapped out a route that promised to lead us through some of the most breathtaking desert landscapes in the country, with ample opportunities for hiking and photography. However, it was on the 5th day of our journey that the trouble began. We had just departed from a quaint little town in northern New Mexico, making our way toward a remote area renowned for its striking rock formations and rumored spiritual energy. At the local gas station, a man had cautioned us to stay on the main roads, his voice low as he spoke of people disappearing in the backcountry. Yet we were young, brimming with confidence, and perhaps a touch of arrogance. We believed we knew better. "Come on, Caleb," Hannah urged, her eyes alight with excitement as she gestured toward a dirt road that diverged from the highway. "This looks way more interesting than the route on the map. Let's check it out." I paused for a moment, the attendant's warning echoing in my mind, but one glance at Hannah's eager expression stirred something within me. I acquiesced, turning onto the unmarked road, but only for a brief moment. We certainly didn't want to lose our way in this vast expanse. Little did I know how foretelling those words would become. Initially, the detour appeared to be a splendid choice, with the scenery captivating us. Towering mesas, peculiar rock formations, and endless stretches of red sand reaching towards the horizon. We paused several times for Hannah to capture the stunning landscape, marveling at its otherworldly beauty. It was during one of these stops that we first caught sight of it. As she stood before the particularly striking rock spire, her camera paused midway to her face. "Caleb?" she said, her voice carrying an unusual tension. "Do you see that?" I followed her gaze, squinting against the harsh sunlight. At first, nothing seemed amiss, but then, shimmering in the heat haze on the horizon, I noticed a figure. It was unnaturally tall and thin, standing perfectly still amidst the undulating waves of hot air. Probably just a weird-looking cactus, I murmured, though a chill crept down my spine, a reminder that even in the oppressive heat, the mind can conjure shadows that linger just out of sight. Eyes out here, Hannah nodded, though her expression suggested doubt. Yeah, you're probably right, she replied, yet she made no move to lift her camera again. Maybe we should head back to the main road. I found myself agreeing, a sudden eagerness to return to familiar ground washing over me. But as I turned our rented SUV around, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I realized I wasn't certain which way we had come. The dirt road we had been following had branched off several times, and in my distraction, I hadn't been paying close attention to our path. No problem, I said, striving to keep my voice steady. In the stillness of the moment, I reassured Hannah, stay calm. We have GPS on our phones. We can just backtrack. But as I pulled out my phone, a chill ran through me. No signal, not even a single bar. Okay, don't panic, I murmured, trying to soothe both her and myself. We have plenty of water, and we can't be too far from the highway. We'll choose a direction and drive. We'll surely find a main road eventually. Hannah nodded, though I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. What about that thing we saw? She asked softly. I replied firmly, it was nothing. It was merely a trick of the light, or so I told myself, hoping to find solace in my own words. We drove for hours, the sun relentless in its glare upon the car, while the air conditioning fought valiantly against the oppressive heat. We rationed our water, acutely aware of how swiftly dehydration could turn perilous in such a harsh landscape. As the day stretched on, the scenery began to twist and turn, rock formations that seemed familiar reappearing like old ghosts, making it feel as though we were caught in an endless loop, despite our unwavering path forward. Course, and always there was that figure on the horizon. No matter which direction we drove, it was there, a distant silhouette shimmering in the heat. Night fell with alarming suddenness, the temperature plummeting as the sun dipped below the horizon. We decided to stop and wait for daylight, hoping to conserve fuel and maybe spot some lights from a town or highway. As we sat in the darkened car, the desert came alive with strange sounds, rustlings and skittering that seemed to come from all around us, punctuated by eerie, ululating cries that echoed through the stillness. Were like no animal I'd ever heard. Caleb, Hannah whispered, clutching my arm. What is that? I opened my mouth to offer some comforting lie, but the words died in my throat because there, in the moonlight, I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, moving across the dunes with an unnatural gliding motion. They were headed straight for our car. I started the engine with shaking hands, peeling away in a spray of sand. In the rearview mirror, I could see the figures pursuing us, moving far faster than anything human had a right to. We drove through the night, fueled by a primal instinct to escape. Terror gripped us as the last dregs of our water supply dwindled. With the break of dawn, we found ourselves in a vast salt flat, white crystals stretching endlessly in every direction. Our pursuers had vanished, but so too had any trace of the world we once knew. This is impossible, Hannah murmured, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. We can't have driven this far. Where are we? I had no answer for her. It felt as if the very laws of geography and physics had unraveled, leaving us in a realm that defied existence, hunted by shadows that should not be real. As the sun climbed higher, the heat enveloped us, a relentless reminder of our plight. As the situation grew dire, our water supply dwindled and the car's fuel gauge flirted with empty. In a moment of desperation, we made the fateful decision to abandon the vehicle, hoping to find safety on foot. It was a grave error. Without the car's fragile shield, we were at the mercy of the relentless desert. The sun scorched our skin, the salt stung our eyes, and each step became a torment upon the blistering earth. We had scarcely traveled a mile when Hannah succumbed to the heat. I attempted to lift her, but my own strength was fading fast. As I knelt beside her, the weight of our predicament settled heavily upon me. As I cradled her head in my lap, I caught sight of it once more, the tall, thin figure, no longer a distant silhouette but now standing just a few yards away. Up close, it was even more unsettling. Its body stretched impossibly, joints bending at angles that defied nature. The face, if one could even call it that, was a smooth expanse of skin, hinting at features that were almost there yet not quite. And somehow, I felt its gaze upon us, piercing through the veil of fear and exhaustion that enveloped me. Just then, more figures began to emerge from the shimmering heat haze, surrounding us, their bodies swaying gently like reeds in a soft breeze. In the stillness of the night, a presence emerged, one that seemed to defy the very fabric of reality. A long, spindly arm reached out, its fingers sharp and needle-like, brushing against Hannah's forehead. She gasped, her eyes snapping open, yet they held no spark of recognition, only a blank, glassy stare. I felt an urge to pull her away, to scream, to fight against the unseen force, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place. The same elongated fingers grazed my face, and in that moment, the world around us shifted. Suddenly, I stood upright, the weariness and thirst evaporating like mist. Hannah was beside me, but as I turned to look at her, a chill of horror washed over me. I realized something was terribly wrong. It was no longer Hannah. Her body had stretched, her features transforming into that same vacant visage I had witnessed on our captors. I attempted to call her name, but no sound emerged. Instead, I felt my own body beginning to shift, stretching and contorting into an unfamiliar shape. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This was not an ending, but a beginning. We had not been pursued. We had been summoned, drawn to this surreal desert to evolve into something new, something timeless and serene, utterly otherworldly. As my transformation reached its conclusion, as I sat in the stillness, my awareness began to stretch, enveloping the vastness of the desert around me. I could feel the presence of countless souls, much like ours, lingering in the shimmering heat, patiently watching for unsuspecting travelers to wander into our domain. A deep certainty settled within me, one that surpassed my previous human understanding. We would wait years, centuries, however long it took, because eventually someone would arrive. Someone would take a wrong turn, catch sight of a figure in the distance, and dismiss it as a mere mirage. And when that moment came, we would be there, poised and ready, to invite them into our vast, glimmering desert, prepared to assist them in shedding their delicate human forms and joining us in our eternal watch. So, if you find yourself driving through the Southwest and spot a dirt road veering into the breathtaking, untouched desert, resist the urge to stray from the main highway. Do not be lured by the allure of the unknown, for in certain deserts, what appears to be a mirage may be all too tangible, and some transformations, once initiated, can never be reversed. The instant my light revealed that pale, humanoid figure deep within the shadows, in the depths of an underwater cave, I found myself ensnared in a web of my own making. It was only when the chilling reality of my predicament set in that I understood the gravity of my situation. I was adrift in a maze of constricted passages, my air supply dwindling with each passing moment, and lurking in the shadows, something that was far from human was on my trail. My name is Olivia, and for over a decade, I have immersed myself in the world of scuba diving. From the vibrant reefs of the Gulf of Mexico to the haunting shipwrecks off Virginia's coast, and even beneath the icy expanse of the Antarctic, I have ventured far and wide. Yet, nothing in my extensive experience could have prepared me for the terror that awaited me here. It had long been said that the Blue Hole cave system off the coast of Biz held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Whispers of vast, unexplored chambers, ancient Mayan artifacts, and peculiar rock formations danced through the air, igniting a spark of curiosity within me. While many serious divers brushed these tales aside as mere exaggerations, something about them lingered in my thoughts, beckoning me closer. So, when a week of freedom from my duties as a marine biologist arrived, I felt compelled to embark on my own journey of discovery. I flew down to Biz and rented a vessel, ready to delve into the mysteries that awaited beneath the surface. Some top-of-the-line diving gear and hired a local guide named Diego to take me out to the Blue Hole. "You sure about this, señorita?" Diego asked as we approached the site, his weathered face creased with concern. "Many divers go into those caves. Not all come out." I brushed off his warning with a confident smile. "I've got over 500 dives under my belt, Diego. I'll be fine." If only I'd listened to him. The dive started routinely enough. The Blue Hole itself was breathtaking. A perfect circle of deep blue in the middle of a coral atoll, like a pupil in a... As I descended into the depths, a giant eye seemed to watch me. The water around me grew darker and cooler, and the vibrant schools of tropical fish gave way to more unusual creatures. Blind cave fish glided silently, translucent shrimp danced in the shadows, and bizarre isopods emerged, looking as if they belonged in a sci-fi movie. At about 120 feet down, I reached the entrance to the cave system. I paused there, taking a moment to double-check my equipment. 2 full tanks of air, multiple lights, and a safety line to guide me back. I felt as prepared as I could be. With a deep breath, I swam into the cave. The first chamber was enormous, big enough to... As I ventured into the depths, the small office building loomed above me, my powerful dive light casting a faint glow that barely touched the far walls. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like giant stone fangs, their tips vanishing into the murky water below. For nearly an hour, I explored that first chamber, captivated by the alien beauty of this underwater realm. Yet, as mesmerizing as it wasn't my true purpose. I yearned to delve deeper, to witness sights unseen by any other diver. It was then that I discovered a narrow passage, leading further into the cave system, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. To squeeze through with my tanks. Every instinct honed by years of diving urged me to turn back. Cave diving rule number 1. Never enter a passage you can't easily turn around in. Yet, the allure of the unknown beckoned me. I reassured myself that I would only take a quick look and then return. I navigated through the narrow passage, my light beam flickering over walls adorned with peculiar, vibrant mineral formations. The passage wound and curled, drawing me deeper into the core of the underwater mountain. After what felt like in the depths of an eternal claustrophobic swim, the passage revealed another chamber. This one, smaller than the first, held an unsettling air. The walls, smoother and almost polished, were adorned with strange swirling patterns that seemed to defy nature. It was then that I noticed it. At first, I mistook it for an unusual rock formation, a pale, vaguely humanoid shape lurking in the far corner. But as I approached, a chill coursed through me. It was no mere rock. The figure stood bipedal, with 2 arms and a head, sending a shiver down my spine. But that was where any resemblance to a human faded away. Its skin was a sickly translucent white, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Where eyes should have been, there were only dark, sunken sockets, and its mouth. Oh, its mouth was filled with row upon row of needle-sharp teeth. I recoiled in horror, my startled movements sending up a cloud of silt. For a moment, the creature was obscured from view, but when the water cleared, it had vanished. Panic seized me as I spun around, my light jerking wildly across the chamber. Where had it gone? What was it? A movement caught my attention. Something caught my eye, darting between 2 rock formations. I caught only a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough to send me racing back toward the narrow passage. In my haste, I hit my head on the low ceiling, nearly knocking myself unconscious. Stars exploded in my vision, and I tasted blood where I'd bitten my lip, but fear propelled me forward. I scrambled through the passage, scraping my hands against the rough walls behind me. I could hear something moving, something swift. I burst back into the large first chamber, my heart pounding fiercely. Amidst the gentle rush of bubbles from my regulator, a sound reached my ears, pulling me from my thoughts. I whirled around, my light beam cutting through the darkness, searching desperately for any sign of what lurked behind me. In that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse, a flash of pale flesh that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Then another flicker on the opposite side of the chamber, and another. A jolt of terror coursed through me as I realized there were multiple creatures, gliding effortlessly through the water with an unnerving speed. Panic surged within me, and I made a frantic dash for the cave entrance, pushing my body to its limits. Yet, in my haste, I lost all sense of direction, the shadows closing in around me. The chamber loomed around me, the exit seemingly just out of reach. Yet all that greeted my eyes was unyielding solid rock. A sense of disorientation washed over me, my breath quickening, each inhale becoming more frantic. I realized I was wasting precious air, so I willed myself to calm, to think clearly. The safety line, yes, I still had it tethered to my belt. All I needed to do was trace it back to the entrance. With trembling hands, I grasped the line and began my cautious journey. But after only a few feet, I felt the abrupt end. The line had been severed. A low, gurgling sound reverberated through the water, a sound that teetered between a growl and something far more sinister. They laughed, a haunting sound echoing in the depths as I swam, desperately searching for an escape. Time slipped away, lost in the twisting corridors of the underwater labyrinth. My air supply dwindled, the gauge creeping into the red zone, a silent warning of impending doom. Just as despair threatened to engulf me, when surrender seemed inevitable, I spotted it, a glimmer of lighter blue in the distance, the promise of an exit. With the last of my strength, I propelled myself toward it, the chilling presence behind me growing ever closer, their cold, clammy hands almost brushing against my back. With a sudden rush, I burst from the cave into the vast expanse of open water, not daring to glance back. I ascended as swiftly as I could, my lungs aflame with the desperate need for air. When I finally broke the surface, I inhaled deeply, gulping in the precious oxygen, tears mingling with the salt water on my cheeks. There, amidst the waves, was Diego's boat, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming relief wash over me. "Señorita," Diego called out, extending a hand to help me aboard. I was on the verge of calling for help, but the weight of the hours I had spent below pressed heavily on my mind. It felt as though I had been submerged for days. As Diego navigated us back to shore, I huddled in the boat, shivering despite the warmth of the sun above. In the sweltering tropical heat, a lingering sensation clung to me, as if unseen eyes were still observing from below, waiting patiently. I attempted to share my experience with Diego, but the words eluded me. How could I possibly convey the terror I had faced? Who would accept such a tale? The following day, I departed from Biz, and since then, the ocean's depths have remained untouched by me. I can only manage showers now, avoiding baths entirely. I tell others that my enthusiasm for diving has waned, yet the reality is far more unsettling. I am haunted by the fear of what may be lurking just beneath the surface of any water I encounter. The depths of the water, a truth unfolds. There are ancient beings lurking in the shadows, waiting with a patience that spans eons. They dwell in realms untouched by human curiosity, and should you venture too far into the abyss, you may find yourself face to face with them. So, dear diver, when you hear whispers of uncharted caves and strange creatures lurking in the dark, heed this advice. Remain in the familiar embrace of well-mapped waters, the vibrant reefs, and the safety of light, for the unknown can hold secrets best left undisturbed. In some caves, the real monsters are not the shadows that linger in your thoughts. They are the ones that lie in wait, cloaked in darkness, with skin as pale as moonlight and teeth that seem to multiply, always eager for the unsuspecting wanderers who dare to enter their realm. Once they catch your scent, their pursuit is relentless. When the tractor coughed and came to a stop in that quiet corner of the farm, a sense of unease washed over me. Yet, it was only when those eerie, unearthly shrieks began to resonate from the cornfield that I understood our beloved fall festival had taken a turn into the unknown. It became a struggle for survival as, by then, half our hayride group had already disappeared into the endless rows of corn, never to be seen again. My name is Liam, and I've spent the last 5 autumns working at Oakfield Farm. It's a decent seasonal job, assisting with the harvest, managing the pumpkin patch, and my personal favorite, driving the hayride tractor. Old Mr. Oakfield Farm is the largest in the county, and their fall festival attracts visitors from all over the state. This year began like any other, with the air crisp and filled with the promise of the season. As winter approached, the leaves transformed into brilliant shades of gold and red, adorning the trees that embraced the sprawling fields. Families gathered, their children's laughter echoing in the air as they delighted in picking pumpkins and weaving through the corn maze. The warm, inviting aroma of apple cider and cinnamon donuts drifted from the snack stand, creating an idyllic autumn atmosphere. I found myself on hayride duty, guiding a tractor that pulled a trailer brimming with hay bales and eager passengers. We meandered through the farm, taking in the sights of pumpkin patches and apple orchards, before venturing into the vast expanse of the cornfield that stretched behind us. It was the final stretch of my day, the sun gracefully sinking toward the horizon. I had a full load of about 20 passengers, a blend of families with young children and a lively group of teenagers seeking autumn adventures. As we rolled into the cornfield, I began my familiar tale. "Now, folks, keep your eyes peeled," I called out, my voice rising above the rumble of the tractor. Legend has it that these fields are haunted by the ghost of old Farmer Mackenzie. They say that on nights like this, you can still hear him wandering the rows, searching for his lost cow. The children listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity, giggled nervously while the teens rolled their eyes. I grinned to myself. It was all part of the act, a bit of harmless fun to add some spice to the ride. We were about halfway through the cornfield when it happened. The tractor, old but reliable, suddenly sputtered and died. I frowned, trying to restart it, but the engine wouldn't turn over. "Hang on, folks," I called back to my passengers. "Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Sit tight, and I'll have us moving again in no time." I hopped down from the tractor, popping the hood to. As I checked the engine, everything appeared normal, yet an unsettling feeling lingered. The corn rustled, though no wind stirred, and the fading sunlight cast long, ominous shadows between the rows. Then I heard it, a sound that chilled my very bones. A high-pitched shriek, distinctly inhuman, echoed from deep within the cornfield. It was soon joined by another, then another, a chorus of unearthly cries that enveloped us. "What was that?" one of the teenagers asked, her voice quivering slightly. "Probably just some birds," I replied, though doubt gnawed at me. As I attempted to maintain a steady voice, I reassured myself that there was nothing to fear, though deep down, I recognized the falsehood of my words. No bird I had ever encountered could produce such a sound. I turned my attention back to the engine, my fingers fumbling in a desperate effort to revive it. Behind me, the restless murmurs of my passengers grew louder, their anxious whispers mingling with those dreadful shrieks that seemed to draw nearer. Suddenly, a woman's voice pierced through the clamor, filled with panic. "Hey, where's Jaden?" I turned to see a mother standing in the trailer, her eyes wide with alarm. "My son. He was right here just a moment ago." A murmur of concern began to weave through the group. As people glanced around, calling out names. It was then that I grasped the true horror of our situation. It wasn't just Jaden who was missing. Nearly half the people who had been on the trailer had vanished without a trace. Everyone, stay calm, I urged, attempting to project a confidence I didn't truly possess. I'm sure they just wandered off to look at something. Let's all stick together. But before I could finish, a scream pierced the air, and one of the teenagers was pointing. In the cornfield, her face was ashen, a reflection of the fear that gripped her. "There's something out there," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. I saw it move. I followed her gaze, squinting into the thickening shadows that cloaked the cornstalks. For a fleeting moment, all was still. Then a sudden flash caught my eye. Something pale and twisted darted between the rows with an unnerving swiftness. "Everyone off the trailer," I called out, urgency lacing my words. "We need to get out of here now." Panic surged through the crowd. People scrambled off the hay bales, children weeping, adults shouting in confusion. I attempted to rally them into a group, hoping to lead them back the way we had come, but chaos reigned around us. Chaos, and then they burst from the corn in a nightmarish wave of creatures that defied description, part plant, part animal, with elongated limbs and faces that were nothing but gaping ems filled with needle-sharp teeth. They moved with terrifying speed, snatching people and dragging them screaming into the corn. I grabbed a pitchfork from the trailer and swung it wildly, managing to fend off one of the creatures as it lunged for a young boy. "Run!" I yelled, shoving the kid towards the path. "Everyone run!" What followed was a nightmare. I'll never forget. We dashed through the cornfield, the creatures hot on our heels, their shrieks echoing in the night air. One by one, people fell behind, their screams abruptly silenced as they were taken. I did my best to lead the dwindling group, but in the chaos and the encroaching darkness, I quickly lost my way. The corn seemed to shift around us, the rows twisting and turning, no matter which direction we chose. It felt as if the field itself was alive, conspiring with the creatures to keep us ensnared. As night descended, we were plunged into near darkness, the world around us growing ever more sinister. In the total darkness, the only light came from the harvest moon, rising above the corn and casting an eerie glow over the field. The attacks grew more frequent, more frenzied. I swung my pitchfork again and again, feeling it connect with something solid, hearing inhuman screeches of pain. By the time we finally burst out of the cornfield, only 5 of us remained. Me, 2 teenagers, and a couple with their young daughter. We ran towards the distant lights of the farm buildings, not daring to look back, and crashed into the festival area, gasping for breath. Wildy, the remaining visitors and staff gazed at us in disbelief. I struggled to articulate the events that had unfolded, but my words tumbled out as a jumble of confusion. Old Mr. Henderson approached, his expression somber. "They've come again, haven't they?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, bewildered. "You knew about this?" He nodded slowly, a weight of understanding in his eyes. "It happens every few generations. The corn, it gets hungry. We try to keep people away from that part of the field, but sometimes..." His voice trailed off and he shook his head. A surge of frustration welled up within me, a desire to demand why he had allowed us to venture into such danger. In that field, if he had been aware of the lurking danger, perhaps things would have unfolded differently. Yet I was too weary, too shaken to act, and so I sank to the ground. The authorities were summoned, naturally, and a vast search ensued, but they uncovered nothing. No bodies, no signs of an attack. By daylight, the cornfield appeared entirely ordinary, concealing the terrors it had harbored. Most people speculated it must have been some sort of collective illusion or a prank that had spiraled out of control. The official report attributed it to mysterious disappearances, and in time, the case faded into obscurity. It grew cold, yet the truth lingers in my mind, surfacing each time I close my eyes. Those twisted creatures, the corn swaying with a sinister intent, and the faces of those I could not save haunt me. I no longer work at Oakfield Farm. The sight of a cornfield is too much to bear these days. But every autumn, as the air turns crisp and the leaves begin to change, memories flood back, and I can't help but wonder, are they still out there, lurking in the corn? Will they awaken their hunger once more? So, if you find yourself at a fall festival, enjoying a hayride on a chilly evening, on an autumn evening, imagine your tractor breaking down in a secluded corner of a cornfield. The rustling you hear is not merely the wind. Those peculiar sounds, they are not just the calls of animals. And whatever you do, do not venture into the corn, for in some fields the harvest is about more than just crops. Some hungers, once stirred, can never be sated. I remember the first time I noticed him, lurking in the shadows of the subway platform. A sense of dread washed over me, but it wasn't until I felt his gaze, following my every move, that I truly understood something was terribly amiss. It was at the edge of my vision that I began to grasp the true horror of my predicament. As the minutes dragged on, my train remained agonizingly distant, and I found myself questioning whether I would emerge from this station alive. My name is Elena, and until that night, I was merely another overworked graduate student in Chicago, Illinois. I had lingered late at the university library, losing myself in research for my thesis. By the time I finally packed up my laptop and made my way to the subway, the city had morphed into its shadowy, nocturnal self. In a place of deep shadows and eerie quiet, punctuated only by the occasional siren or drunken shout, the Monroe station lay deserted as I descended the stairs. My footsteps echoed off the grimy tiles, a familiar sound that had accompanied me on countless journeys. Yet that night something felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an inexplicable energy. I glanced at the arrival board, 20 minutes until the next downtown train. Great, I sighed, resigning myself to a long wait, and moved toward my usual spot on the platform. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the platform, partially cloaked in the shadows of a flickering fluorescent light, there stood a figure that sent a shiver down my spine. He was tall, almost unnaturally so, and rail-thin, his long dark coat enveloping him despite the summer heat. Yet, it was his stillness that truly unsettled me. He didn't shift his weight, didn't glance at his phone, nor did he engage in any of the countless small movements that people typically make while waiting. He simply stood there, like a statue, and I found myself telling my mind to remain calm. In the bustling heart of New York, where shadows dance and whispers linger, a sense of unease settled over me. The subway, a realm of peculiar souls, had cast its spell. I turned my gaze to my phone, seeking solace in its glow, but time slipped away like sand through fingers. When I dared to look up again, a chill crept down my spine. The man had shifted, now standing halfway down the platform, his back turned to me. I hadn't heard a sound, nor caught a glimpse of his movement. It was as if he had simply materialized. My throat tightened, and a dry knot formed as I realized the unsettling truth. Something was amiss. I scanned my surroundings, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Frantically, I searched for anyone else, but the platform remained empty, just him and me. I thought about leaving, heading back up to the street to catch a cab, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Was it fear, perhaps, or morbid curiosity? Maybe it was some deeper instinct that whispered to me that running would only make things worse. So I stayed, my eyes locked on the strange figure. And then he turned his head, slowly, so slowly, to look at me. I wish I could say I saw something monstrous, that he had glowing eyes or fangs, or something that would justify my unease, the terror coursing through me. Yet the truth was almost worse. His face was blank, expressionless, like a mannequin given horrible life. Our eyes met, or at least I think they did. It was hard to tell given the distance and the poor lighting. But in that moment, I felt seen, not just observed, but seen in a way that left me feeling exposed, vulnerable. I looked away quickly, my heart pounding. When I gathered the courage to look back, he had moved again, closer now, still facing away from me but only a few yards down the platform. Panic rose in my throat. I backed away, moving toward the stairs, but as I did, he moved too, matching my pace exactly, always keeping the same distance between us, always lingering just in my peripheral vision. This continued for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. Me inching toward the exit, him mirroring my movements with uncanny precision. The oppressive silence hung over the station, broken only by the distant rumble of trains on other lines. I reached the base of the stairs and paused, one foot on the bottom step. Part of me screamed to run. To retreat back to the comforting embrace of the street above felt like the wisest choice, yet a deeper, more instinctual part of me cautioned against turning my back on the looming figure. So, I remained there, paralyzed by uncertainty, my gaze fixed as the silhouette began to pivot ever so slowly in my direction. It was then that I heard it, the sweet sound of an approaching train, my train. A rush of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a chilling realization. I had to catch that train. Deep down, I understood with an unsettling certainty that if I missed it, I would be trapped forever. In the dim light of the station, the moments that followed became a haze. I found myself racing toward the edge of the platform, the presence of the stranger behind me no longer a concern. I could sense him, moving with an eerie swiftness and silence. Suddenly, the train thundered into the station, a whirlwind of wind and the harsh cry of metal. I positioned myself, poised and ready, anticipating the doors to swing open. As the train began to slow, I dared to glance back. There he was, much closer now, his arm reaching out as if to seize me. Fingers stretched unnaturally long, joints twisting at angles that defied reason. The doors slid open, and I found myself propelled inside, stumbling into the emptiness of the car. As I turned, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the platform, and there stood a figure at the very edge, his blank face directed toward me. Then, with a soft hiss, the doors closed, and the train began to pull away, leaving behind that strange man and the haunting platform. I sank into a seat, my legs trembling too much to support me as the adrenaline ebbed away. I was left grappling with the reality of what had just transpired. Had it all been a figment of my imagination? Was I truly that exhausted? As I reflected on my studies, I couldn't shake the feeling that my mind had woven a tapestry of bizarre hallucinations. Yet, deep within, I understood that what I experienced was all too real. The terror I felt was too visceral, too raw to be mere figments of imagination. When I finally arrived at my stop, I half expected to see that strange man lingering on the platform, but instead, I was greeted by the familiar late-night crowd. Tired workers and a few tipsy revelers making their way home from the bars. I hurried back to my apartment, double-checking every lock before collapsing into bed. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, it was, in the quiet hours of the night, I found myself haunted by dreams of endless subway platforms and silent eyes that seemed to follow shadowy figures. The next day, I reassured myself that it had all been a mere fantasy brought on by stress. I resumed my routine, attempting to tuck those unsettling memories away. Yet, as dusk approached and the thought of another late night at the library loomed, I began to weave excuses to remain at home. A week passed, then two, and I opted for cabs or buses, anything to steer clear of the subway. My friends noticed this sudden aversion to public transportation, but I dismissed their concerns with vague explanations, keeping the true nature of my fears close to my chest. Excuses about wanting more exercise lingered in my mind, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. One night, running late for a crucial meeting, I found myself with no choice but to take the subway. As I descended the stairs to the 886th Street station, my palms were slick with sweat. The platform appeared normal, filled with the usual crowds of commuters and the familiar bustle of a New York evening. I began to relax, feeling foolish for my earlier fears. And then I saw him. He stood at the far end of the platform, half hidden behind a pillar. An unnaturally tall, thin figure, his blank face turned toward me. Our eyes locked across the bustling platform, and in that fleeting moment, an unsettling realization washed over me. This was far from over. Perhaps it would linger indefinitely. I turned and fled, racing down the stairs 2 at a time, not pausing until I reached the street. I hailed the first cab that came into view, my hands trembling as I relayed my address to the driver. As we pulled away from the curb, I couldn't resist a glance back at the subway entrance. There he stood, a solitary figure at the top of the stairs, watching my cab vanish into the chaotic New York traffic. Since that day, I have avoided the subway, unable to summon the courage to step foot inside again. In a station, I've altered my routines, shifted my habits, even found a new apartment. Yet, on certain late nights, I catch a fleeting glimpse of something in my peripheral vision. A tall, thin shape lingering at the edge of the shadows. It makes me ponder. Did I truly escape that night? Or is he still out there, patiently waiting, always just beyond my sight? So, if you ever find yourself in a subway station late at night and notice a peculiar figure lurking in the shadows, don't brush it off. Don't attempt to rationalize it away. And whatever you do, do not allow anything to obstruct your path to safety, for there are creatures that do not merely pursue their quarry in the wilderness. Some lie in wait within the shadows of the tunnels and platforms beneath us. They are patient, ever watchful, and relentless in their pursuit. Once they have set their sights on you, their hunt is unyielding. The moment the stranger appeared from the depths of the ocean, an unsettling feeling washed over me. His eyes were wild, his garments in tatters, and his tale was one that seemed almost too fantastical to comprehend. Yet, as darkness enveloped us and those eerie figures began to circle our flickering bonfire, I knew we were not alone. It was a warm summer night, and I, Caleb, had gathered with friends for what was meant to be a joyous beach bonfire party. The last weekend before our senior year of college felt like the perfect opportunity to celebrate. We had discovered a secluded spot, an hour's drive from campus, far removed from the bustling crowds of popular beaches. It seemed like the ideal place to unwind, free from the concerns of noise complaints or campus security. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere shifted, hinting at something more than just a night of fun. Casting a warm golden glow across the water, we got the fire going, the crackling flames mingling with the sound of waves lapping at the shore. The laughter of friends filled the air. It was idyllic. Someone broke out a guitar, and soon we were all singing along, badly but enthusiastically, to every cheesy pop song we could think of. I was in the middle of an impassioned rendition of Don't Stop Believin' when I saw him, a figure stumbling out of the surf. At first, I thought it was one of our group, perhaps someone who had gone for a late swim, but as he drew closer, I realized I didn't recognize him. The singing trailed off as others noticed the newcomer. He was a man, probably in his mid-30s, with wild matted hair and a scraggly beard. His clothes were soaked and torn, hanging off his thin frame, but it was his eyes that really caught my attention. Wide and frantic, darting around as if expecting an attack at any moment. "Hey man, you okay?" My friend Liam called out, always the first to offer help. The stranger's head snapped towards us, and for a moment, I thought he might bolt back into the ocean. But then he stumbled forward, collapsing onto the sand near our fire. "Thank God," he gasped, his voice raspy as if from disuse. I thought I'd never see people again." We gathered around him, someone offering a blanket, another a bottle of water. He gulped it down greedily, water spilling down his chin. "What happened to you?" I asked, curiosity overcoming my initial weariness. "Were you on a boat that sank or something?" He shook his head vehemently. No boat. I was taken." A nervous chuckle ran through our group. Taken? Liam asked. What? As the man's eyes fixed on Liam, an unsettling intensity radiated from them, causing me to instinctively step back. Not aliens, he murmured. Something worse, something from the deep. Then, he began to weave a tale so extraordinary and chilling that we initially dismissed it as an elaborate prank. He spoke of his time as a marine biologist on an expedition to explore the mysteries of deep-sea life in the Gulf of Mexico. Their vessel was a marvel of modern engineering, outfitted with the latest submersible technology. Yet, on their third dive, something unimaginable occurred. It was a chilling tale, one that began with the submersible's fateful encounter. Something massive, with tentacles strong enough to crush steel as if it were mere tinfoil, had attacked. The sub was pulled down, deeper into the inky blackness of the ocean. He recounted waking in an underwater city, a vast complex of ancient stone buildings that still seemed to pulse with life. The inhabitants were a struggle to describe. Humanoid yet distinctly wrong, with fish-like features, scales replacing skin, and webbed hands ending in razor-sharp claws. They kept us alive, he said, his voice trembling with the weight of his memories. They studied us, experimented on us. I witnessed the transformation of people, turning them into things like them. He spoke of his escape during an undersea earthquake, finding an air pocket and eventually surfacing. For days, he drifted before washing up on our beach. As his tale concluded, a heavy silence enveloped our group. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the gentle lapping of waves on the shore. That's quite a story, I finally said, striving to keep my voice steady. As I listened to him, I felt an urge to laugh, to brush aside his words as the ramblings of someone who had endured a great ordeal. Yet, there was something in his gaze, a haunted glimmer, that caused me to pause. You don't believe me, he stated, not seeking affirmation but rather acknowledging the disbelief that hung in the air. I wouldn't believe me either, but they are real and they are coming. His voice trembled with conviction. They've been down there for thousands of years, watching us, waiting. Now, they are ready to reclaim the surface. A chill crept down my spine, a sensation that had little to do with the coolness of the night surrounding us. As I opened my mouth to respond, a piercing scream sliced through the stillness of the night. We all turned sharply, our hearts racing. Megan, who had ventured a bit further down the beach, was retreating from the water's edge, her hand trembling as she pointed into the abyss. "There's something out there," she cried, her voice laced with fear. I saw eyes. We hurried to her side, straining our gazes into the enveloping darkness. For a fleeting moment, I discerned nothing, but then a swift movement caught my eye, something breaking the surface of the water, if only for an instant. It resembled an elongated human arm, unsettling in its appearance, reaching out from the depths. Wickedly curved claws lingered in the shadows as the stranger whispered behind us, "They found me, they found us." Panic enveloped us, and we scrambled back towards our bonfire, huddling together, our eyes scanning the water. More shapes emerged, dark forms gliding just beneath the surface, circling our position. "We need to get out of here," Liam urged, his usual bravado stripped away, revealing raw fear. "We need to get to the cars." But our vehicles were parked up a narrow path that wound through a dense stretch of woods. To reach them, we would have to turn our backs on the ocean and whatever lurked just beyond the waves. In the stillness of the night, before we could gather our thoughts, an unsettling sound pierced the air, reminiscent of a wet towel being torn apart. Suddenly, something erupted from the water, illuminated by the flickering firelight. I caught a fleeting glimpse of glistening scales, bulbous eyes, and a mouth brimming with needle-sharp teeth. A wave of screams erupted from our group, sending us scattering in all directions, some darting toward the woods, while others stood frozen in terror. I stumbled backward, tripping over a piece of driftwood and landing hard on the sand. As I scrambled to my feet, I noticed more of them emerging from the surf, their movements both eerie and mesmerizing. With a dreadful fluidity, they crawled and slithered, their bodies vaguely humanoid yet twisted, elongated in ways that defied anatomy. One of them seized Megan as she attempted to flee, and I watched in horror as it dragged her toward the water, her screams abruptly silenced as she was pulled under. "The fire!" the stranger yelled, snapping me out of my daze. "They hate the fire. It's your only chance." Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed a burning branch from the bonfire, wielding it like a torch. The nearest creature hissed and recoiled, its form shuddering in the light. Flesh sizzled where sparks landed, and everyone grabbed something burning. I shouted for us to form a circle, and those of us who remained did as I said, creating a ring of fire around us. The creatures prowled just outside the circle of light, their inhuman eyes reflecting the flames. For what felt like hours, we stood our ground, waving our makeshift torches at any creature that dared to get too close. I lost track of how many of our group were taken. Every time I heard a scream cut short, every splash that signaled another person dragged into the depths, I felt a chill run through me. A piece of my sanity slipped away as the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The attacks grew less frequent, and by the time the sun peeked over the horizon, the beach was empty, save for our small, shell-shocked group. We made our way to the cars in silence, no one daring to speak about what we had witnessed. The stranger was gone, vanished at some point during the night. Part of me wondered if he had ever really been there at all. In the days that followed, we tried to report what had happened, but with no bodies, no evidence beyond our wild imaginations. Stories we were brushed aside as mere drunken college kids indulging in a prank. The official report labeled it a tragic accident, a few of our friends lost to the sea. But I know the truth, and it haunts me each time I close my eyes. Those twisted forms rising from the waves, those insatiable, inhuman eyes. Since that night, I haven't dared to set foot on a beach. The mere sight of the ocean sends a shiver of panic through me, for I know they are out there, lurking, waiting. One day they will come for us all. So, if you ever find yourself on a beach late at night, as night falls and shadows dance upon the water, one might catch a glimpse of something unusual lurking beneath the surface. It's wise not to dismiss such sightings, nor to let reason cloud your judgment. Steer clear of the waves, for some mysteries are best left undisturbed in the depths. Once they breach the surface, their hunger for the light becomes insatiable. I remember the moment I spotted that van, parked ominously near the playground. A chill crept down my spine, but it was my son's innocent mention of his special friend that truly awakened the dread within me. In that instant, I understood we were teetering on the edge of a parent's deepest fears. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when everything changed. My name is Olivia, and until last month, I was just another overworked single mom trying to balance a career with raising my 6-year-old son, Jaden. Our neighborhood, Elmwood Park, had always been our sanctuary, a place where Jaden could burn off energy while I caught up on emails or simply enjoyed a few moments of peace. But on that fateful day, I noticed he was missing. Those crucial heart-stopping minutes had already ticked by, and I knew our lives would never be the same. As we made our way to the park, my companion was bubbling with excitement over the new climbing structure that had just been installed. The familiar path felt comforting, yet something caught my attention. A nondescript white van parked across the street from the playground. It was not uncommon to see unfamiliar vehicles around, but this one stirred an unsettling feeling within me. I attempted to dismiss the unease as we stepped into the park. Jaden dashed toward the swings, his favorite spot, while I took a seat on a nearby bench, keeping a watchful eye on him as I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone. With my phone in hand, I half listened to his delighted squeals as he pumped his legs, striving to soar higher and higher. After a while, Jaden left the swings behind and made his way to the sandbox. I watched as he approached another little boy, and soon they were both engrossed in the construction of an elaborate sandcastle. Satisfied that he was happily occupied, I turned my attention back to my phone, responding to a few work emails. It wasn't until about 20 minutes later that I noticed the sudden silence from Jaden. I looked up, scanning the playground for his familiar mop of brown hair, but he was nowhere to be seen. In the stillness of the playground, a sense of unease settled over me. I called out for Jaden, my voice echoing in the quiet air, but there was no answer. Panic began to flutter in my chest as I rose to my feet, scanning the familiar surroundings. He wasn't on the slides, nor was he tucked away in the tube tunnel where he often liked to hide. Other parents, sensing my growing distress, approached with offers of help, but my mind raced back to the van. A chill ran through me as I sprinted toward the street, hoping against hope that my fears were unfounded. But as I reached the curb, my heart sank. The van was gone. In the midst of a blur, panic surged through me as I reached for the phone, my voice trembling while I described Jaden and the van. Officers soon arrived, cordoning off the area, their questions piercing through the fog of my mind. I responded automatically, my thoughts struggling to grasp the unfolding reality. As hours slipped by in a haunting haze, the initial rush of activity faded into a heavy silence. I found myself on the living room couch, encircled by concerned friends and neighbors, their words barely reaching me as the shadows deepened around us. My eyes were fixed on the front door, hoping for Jaden to step through with that familiar sheepish grin, ready to explain that it had all been a silly game of hide and seek. But he didn't return that night, nor the next or the one after. The days that followed turned into a haunting blur of police interviews, press conferences, and sleepless nights. I found myself replaying every moment of that afternoon, lost in a maze of what-ifs. What if I had been more attentive? What if we had left the park just 5 minutes earlier? What if I trusted my instincts about that van. It was during one of the police interviews that a detective asked a question that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Harris, had Jaden mentioned any new friends recently? Anyone he seemed particularly excited about? I started to shake my head, then froze as a memory surfaced. A few days before the incident, Jaden had been unusually quiet on our walk home from school. When I asked what was wrong, he'd hesitated before saying, "Mommy, can I tell you a secret?" I'd encouraged him, of course, always eager to be his. Confident, "I have a special friend," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's a secret," he insisted, "one I can't tell anyone about." At the time, I assumed he was speaking of an imaginary friend. After all, it wasn't unusual for children his age to have such companions. I didn't want to stifle his creativity, so I merely smiled and reassured him that it was all right to have secrets, as long as they weren't the kind that made him feel bad or scared. Now, reflecting on that conversation, a wave of unease washed over me. How could I have? In the dim light of the room, the detective's expression grew serious as I shared the troubling news. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" he inquired, his voice heavy with weariness rather than blame. I found myself at a loss for words, the weight of guilt pressing down on me like a thick fog. With this new revelation, the investigation shifted into high gear. They meticulously sifted through security footage from local shops, spoke with Jaden's teachers and our neighbors, and even issued a nationwide alert for the van. Days slipped into weeks, and Jaden's face became a haunting presence, appearing everywhere. Every local news channel displayed his smile, haunting me from the missing person posters taped to telephone poles and shop windows. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on anything but the search for my son. Then, exactly 1 month after Jaden disappeared, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. With trembling hands, I answered. "Mrs. Harris?" a gruff voice said. "This is Detective Ramirez. We need you to come down to the station right away." My heart leapt into my throat. "Did you find him? Is Jaden okay?" There was a pause that seemed to stretch on forever. Stretching on for what felt like an eternity, I urged Mrs. Harris to come down to the station as quickly as she could. The drive to the police station seemed to last forever, my mind racing through every possible scenario, from the joyous reunion I had been hoping for to the devastating news I dreaded to imagine. As I was led into an interview room, I noticed an unusual flurry of activity in the station. Detective Ramirez awaited me, his expression a careful mask of professionalism. "Mrs. Harris," he began, "about an hour ago, we received a 911 call from a gas. In a small town, about 200 miles north of here, a station attendant reported seeing a young boy wandering alone in the parking lot, matching Jaden's description." I gasped, tears welling in my eyes. Could it be him? Is he okay? The detective raised a hand, calming my racing heart. "We believe it is Jaden," he said gently. "Local police have picked him up and are bringing him here as we speak. But, Mrs. Harris, I need to prepare you. Jaden appears to be physically unharmed, but he isn't speaking. We don't yet know what he's been through or what he might have witnessed. It's going to be a long road ahead." As I stood on that road, the words around me faded into a distant murmur. My son was alive. He was coming home and nothing else mattered. When the moment of reunion finally arrived, it was a blend of joy and sorrow. Jaden appeared smaller, his eyes wide and glistening in a way that no child's eyes should. Instead of rushing into my arms as I had envisioned, he approached with caution, as if uncertain of his welcome. I knelt down, arms open, yet I remained still, allowing him to dictate the pace. After what felt like an eternity, he stepped into my embrace. As I held him, feeling his small body tremble against mine, I made a silent vow. I would help him heal. I would do whatever it took to make him feel safe again. The months that followed were challenging beyond anything I could have imagined. Jaden remained largely nonverbal, communicating mainly through nods and headshakes. Nightmares plagued his sleep, and loud noises or sudden movements would send him into a panic. Slowly, with the help of therapists and child psychologists, we began to piece together what had happened. Once upon a time, in a quiet park, a young boy named Jaden found himself drawn into a web of trust spun by a seemingly kind friend. For weeks, this man had showered Jaden with small gifts and gentle attention, weaving a spell of innocence that would lead to a fateful day. On that day, he lured Jaden into a ride, promising to unveil a magical place that danced just beyond the horizon of the boy's imagination. But what followed was a dark chapter, shrouded in the shadows of Jaden's mind, where the details of his month in captivity lay hidden, locked away in the depths of his trauma. The man who had taken him was eventually caught, his fate sealed by overwhelming evidence. Yet Jaden found himself unable to testify, his voice silenced by fear. Now, a year has passed since those haunting days, and the echoes of that time linger, a reminder of the darkness that can sometimes creep into the light of innocence. Jaden returned home, his voice a whisper compared to what it once was. He's back in school, cautiously making new friends, slowly piecing together the childhood that was so abruptly taken from him. As for me, I've taken on the role of a passionate advocate for child safety education and stricter laws against those who would do harm. While I cannot alter the past for Jaden, I strive to shield other children from similar fates. Each night, as I tuck Jaden into bed, a wave of gratitude washes over me, thankful that he is safe in his own room. Yet there lingers a shadow of concern. It's fascinating how swiftly a seemingly ordinary day can shift into something unsettling. The truth is, the creatures we often dismiss as mere figments of imagination are lurking in the shadows, ready to seize an opportunity when we least expect it, especially when it comes to the innocence of a child. So, dear parents, as the night falls, hold your little ones a bit closer. Share with them the importance of safety, of listening to their instincts. And remember, if something feels amiss, a van that seems out of place, a stranger's gaze lingering too long, do not hesitate to act. Gather around, dear listeners, for I have a tale that speaks of the delicate balance between safety and the unknown. In a world where a parent's watchful eye and a community's vigilance are often the only shields against the shadows, every fleeting moment can hold the weight of dread. Picture this: a sunny day at the park, laughter echoing as children play. But then, a sudden chill as I watched my child vanish into the dark tubes of the playground. An unsettling feeling gripped my heart, and as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, I sensed that something was amiss. When he finally emerged, pale and trembling, his silence spoke volumes of a terror that had unfolded in those hidden depths. What began as a simple outing transformed into a haunting memory, reminding us all of the lurking fears that can turn an ordinary day into a chilling tale. My name is Mia, and I am the mother of two spirited souls. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon at Elmwood Park, I found myself in a familiar scene, one that many parents know well. My two boys, 7-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Liam, were full of energy, their laughter mingling with that of other children as they played. I had faced my fair share of minor scrapes and the occasional public tantrum, but that day felt different. The weather was perfect, and after picking them up from school, we decided to take a detour to the park before heading home. The playground was alive with the sounds of joy as children climbed, swung, and slid, unaware of the unexpected turn that awaited us. With hearts full of joy, Noah dashed off to join Joe and a group of children his age on the monkey bars, while Liam made a beeline for his beloved playground feature, a large, twisting structure of interconnected tubes, perfect for crawling through. I found a nearby bench, settling in to keep a watchful eye on the boys as I scrolled through emails on my phone. Every few minutes, I glanced up, observing Liam as he vanished into one end of the tubes, only to reappear from another, his giggles echoing like whispers in the night. It was a game he never seemed to tire of, and after about 15 minutes, I noticed I hadn't seen him come out for a while. "Liam," I called out, not too worried at first. Sometimes he liked to sit in the tubes, enjoying the cool shade they provided. No response. I stood up, moving closer to the structure. "Liam, honey, time to come out now." Still nothing. A twinge of unease began to creep into my stomach. I approached the nearest tube entrance, bending down to peer inside. "Liam!" The tube was empty. My heart rate quickened as I circled the structure, checking each exit. No sign of my little boy. I started calling his name louder. My voice, tinged with a hint of panic, caught the attention of other parents. "Noah!" I shouted, spotting my older son still on the monkey bars. "Have you seen Liam?" Noah shook his head, confusion and a touch of fear flickering in his eyes. The next few minutes blurred into a frantic search, with other parents joining in, peering behind bushes, under benches, and anywhere a small boy might hide. Yet, Liam was nowhere to be found. Just as I was about to call the police, a small voice broke through the tension. "Mommy!" I whirled around to see Liam emerging from one of the tubes, relief washing over me. It flooded through me, so intense it made my knees weak. I rushed to him, scooping him up in my arms. "Oh my God, Liam, where were you?" I was so worried, but as I held him, I realized something was wrong. His little body was trembling, and when I pulled back to look at his face, his eyes were wide with an emotion I'd never seen in him before. Fear, shock. I couldn't quite place it. "Sweetie, what happened? Were you stuck in the tube?" Liam shook his head slowly, his lower lip quivering. I can't tell," he whispered. "What do you mean you can't tell?" Something frightened him in there. He nodded, burying his face in my shoulder, his small hands clutching my shirt tightly. I tried to question him further, but he refused to say anything more. By this point, a small crowd had gathered around us, murmuring in concern. I thanked them for their help, then quickly gathered Noah and headed home, with Liam clinging to me the entire way. That night, Liam had terrible nightmares. He woke up screaming, something he hadn't done since he was a toddler. When I rushed to his room, he was sitting up in bed. His eyes darted around the room, searching for some unseen threat. "It's okay, baby," I soothed, holding him close. "It was just a bad dream. You're safe now." Yet, even as I spoke those words, a chill ran down my spine, for I knew deep down that whatever had happened in those tubes wasn't merely a figment of his imagination. The next few days were tough. Liam became clingy, refusing to let me out of his sight. He had more nightmares, and during the day he'd sometimes freeze up, staring off into the distance, with a gaze that drifted into the vastness of space. He wore that same wide-eyed, fearful expression I had noticed at the park. I explored every avenue I could think of to coax him into sharing his thoughts. I posed gentle questions, employed play therapy techniques I had stumbled upon online, and even offered his favorite treats as incentives. Yet, each time I broached the subject of the incident in the tube, he would retreat into silence, sometimes overwhelmed by tears. After a week of this heart-wrenching struggle, I felt it was time to seek the guidance of a professional. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sophia Patel, a child psychologist renowned for her expertise in trauma and anxiety. In our first session, Dr. Patel took a moment to speak with Liam privately while I waited in the lobby, my heart heavy with anxiety. When she finally called me back in, her expression was serious. "Miss Rodriguez," she began, "Liam is showing clear signs of post-traumatic stress." A chill ran through me as I pondered what could have transpired in those tubes that left such a mark on him. "But what could have happened?" I asked, my voice tinged with frustration and worry. "He was only in there for a few minutes." Dr. Patel shook her head gently. "Time can be subjective, especially for children." In the midst of high stress, Liam recounted his time in those tubes, insisting it felt far longer than mere minutes. A chill settled in the pit of my stomach as I listened. When I asked him how long he believed he had been there, he spoke of days, describing a dark place filled with strange noises, a sensation of being transported elsewhere. I found it difficult to grasp this information. It seemed incomprehensible that Liam could have lived through days in just a fleeting moment. Dr. Patel's voice remained gentle as she addressed me. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I know this is difficult to hear, but I need to ask, has Liam ever shown signs of unusual experiences before seeing things that aren't there or claiming to visit strange places?" I shook my head vehemently. "No, never. He has a vivid imagination, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 5-year-old. She nodded, making a note on her pad. "I'd like to see Liam for regular sessions. Will work on helping him process this experience and develop coping mechanisms for his anxiety." As we left the office, my mind was reeling. Part of me wanted to dismiss it all seemed like an overactive imagination, a childish fantasy that had taken a dark turn. Yet, I couldn't forget the look on Liam's face when he first emerged from those tubes. The sheer terror reflected in his eyes, the way his entire body shook with fear. As the weeks passed, Liam gradually began to heal. The nightmares lessened, and a hint of his former cheerfulness returned. Still, he avoided enclosed play structures, often pausing to gaze at shadows with a cautious demeanor. It was during a session with Dr. Patel, we finally found a moment of respite. Liam had been focused on drawing, a technique the doctor used to help him express his feelings. Suddenly, he dropped his crayon and looked up at me, tears glistening in his eyes. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. My heart tightened at his words. "What monster, sweetie?" He pointed to his drawing, which depicted the playground tubes in a crude manner. Inside, however, was a mass of scribbled black crayon, with glowing red eyes lurking within. "It's in the tubes," Liam continued, his words tumbling out in a rush now. I crawled into the darkness, and suddenly, I found myself in a different place. It was cold and unsettling, with sounds echoing around me. A creature reached out, but I fled, running until I discovered the path back. I caught Dr. Patel's gaze. Her face was calm, yet attentive. "Liam," she said softly, "was this monster something you've encountered before?" Perhaps in a film or a story? Liam shook his head with urgency. No, it was real, and I believe it's still lurking, waiting. A chill crept down my spine, and I wished to comfort him, to assure him that everything would be all right. There were no such things as monsters, yet the conviction in his voice made me hesitate. After the session, Dr. Patel pulled me aside. Mrs. Rodriguez, I know this is hard to hear, but we need to consider the possibility that Liam experienced something traumatic, something his mind is interpreting through the lens of a child's imagination. The monster could be a way for him to process a frightening encounter with a real person. My blood ran cold at the implication. You think someone hurt him in those tubes? She held up a hand, signaling for me to listen. It's not to say that's the only explanation, but we must remain receptive to every possibility. I would suggest a physical examination, just to eliminate any concerns of physical trauma. The following days unfolded like a haunting tale, filled with doctor visits, police inquiries, and restless nights. Thankfully, the physical exam revealed no indications of abuse. The police conducted a meticulous search of the playground, yet nothing unusual was uncovered. Ultimately, we found ourselves with a multitude of questions, while Liam's account remained unwavering. He was adamant that he had experienced something unsettling. He found himself in a dark and frightening world, where a monster had once tried to catch him. How could that be possible? As the weeks drifted by, life gradually returned to its usual rhythm. Liam's nightmares became less frequent, and he even began to express a desire to explore other playgrounds, though the tube structures still held a certain dread for him. Occasionally, I would catch him gazing into dark corners or closets, a wary expression on his face, as if he were anticipating something to emerge. In those moments, I too began to see the world through a different lens, my once rational perspective shifting ever so slightly. There was a time when I held a firm skepticism towards the claims of the supernatural. Yet, Liam's experience stirred something within me, shaking the very foundation of my certainty. A flicker of doubt crept in, whispering what if he was indeed speaking the truth? What if, for a fleeting moment, my little boy had ventured into a realm beyond our understanding? The details of that day in the tubes may forever remain a mystery, but one thing is clear: my perception of playgrounds has irrevocably changed. Now, each time I see a child disappear into those twisting tube structures, I find myself holding my breath, silently hoping for their safe return. Them to emerge quickly, safely, unchanged. For sometimes the boundary between our world and another may be more delicate than we realize. In the seemingly innocent play structures of our daily lives, there could be gateways to realms we cannot fathom. So, if your child ever stands still at the playground or shares a tale that feels too extraordinary to be real, pay close attention. Truly listen. For in their wide eyes and quivering voices, there may lie a hint of something that transcends our usual comprehension, a whisper of the extraordinary that beckons us to remember. The world holds mysteries that are both peculiar and, at times, unsettling beyond our wildest dreams.